For ages, this land got trapped in a relentless war against monsters that crawled up from the deep. And with no match for the monsters' raw power, humanity kept getting crushed again and again, so with. That's why this tiny squad is now boxed in, surrounded and pinned down by a rampaging horde on the spot. Their leader stared at the chaos, asking if any of them could even survive this desperate showdown. Right as the monster hurls itself at him, its giant jaws slam shut with a horrifying snap, and the sound alone freezes the. A divine decree suddenly slammed into their world, and it instantly rerouted the entire course of history for everyone. A brand new power burst out of the chaos swirling around that mysterious, robed figure for. And that's how the day humanity finally got the unbelievable gift of magic. Right then, like fate flipped the switch. With a flick of their hand, they could unleash terrifying elemental power and just like that, a young mage strolls in like it's nothing, casually telling the whole squad the danger's already been dealt with. The squad's leader just stares in stunned silence, absolutely reeling because the monsters are already wiped out, yet. But later, that same young mage's world flips when he hears the parties kicking him out, straight up, stunned speechless. His leader recognizes Ryan's insane magic, then slams the door anyway, declaring him unfit for the underground. Drilling into him that these deadly missions can't be survived without real teamwork. But Ryan snaps back, saying he didn't turn into a magician just to play nice with everyone. He digs through his brutal past, where even the thought of becoming a magician felt totally out of reach. Sure of himself, he couldn't shake the feeling he was way too clumsy and slow for any real physical activity. Until a mysterious mentor pulled him aside and shattered the idea that any of his weaknesses even mattered. He told her that with magic at his fingertips, he could grab anything he ever dreamed of. 3 years later, he'd grown strong enough to pull off deadly missions solo. Then this stranger steps up, stares at him, and blurts, "You're the famous genius magician." And this new party is begging him, because they desperately need his power for a hidden underground mission. Their goal sounded simple at first, just wipe out some low-level monsters, yet. But they also teased an irresistible rumor of a hidden treasure right nearby. Only for Ryan to finally clock it, too late, that what they truly wanted wasn't his power at all. They didn't want him to win, they only wanted him thrown out as a decoy to buy time for that insanely powerful monster. And Ryan finally realizes these new enemies aren't just stronger, they're on a whole different level than before. He finally realizes his old party bolted the second they clocked it. Turns out they found out there was no treasure. A bitter, gut-punch truth slams into him, and pure burning rage takes over. Swearing he'll never count on anyone again, he digs deep, grabs his resolve, and charges for the fight. He decides no backup, no excuses, he's taking this one down by himself. And make every single person admit his power, no matter how much they hate it. Then boom, something crashes into him with an insane, gut-wrenching force. He's sprawled on the ground, completely dazed, trying to figure out how he got knocked there so suddenly. Then he glances down, and a huge, bleeding wound sprawls across his shoulder. That sudden injury hit like a thunderclap, and fear locked his whole body in place. The monster almost sounded impressed, like it couldn't believe Ryan had dodged a blow that should have killed him. It was hooked by what he could do, and this felt like a once-in-a-lifetime shot to finally talk to a human. Wait, it was even starting to. Daring Ryan to show that jaw-dropping magic one more time. A little creature on the side snickers at him, fully sensing just how clueless he really is. Ryan scrambles to explain his magic needs both arms, and then he has to admit he can't use them anymore, but still. But the monster snaps, "Why don't you just use magic to bring them back?" And then the question cuts off as he trails off. A totally absurd proposal to Ryan. He erupts and screams that magic that strong simply can't exist. A strange creature freezes in place for a beat, staring him down as his desperation spirals higher. As Ryan lays it out, he says injuries like this are a death sentence for any magician. And right when despair crashes over him, a terrifying truth finally clicks in his mind. This monster tells them that the back and forth has been wildly valuable, basically gold for its research. Theory says your magic power scales straight with how many fingers you've got, with. That would forge a four-armed beast just like it, and make it ridiculously unstoppable. Now this monster, Kevil, is itching to get magical powers all to itself. But Kevil yanks Ryan right out of the monster's reach, while Ryan thrashes wildly, trapped in that brutal grip and unable to break free. And Panic is losing it, demanding to know exactly where they're taking him. As they step into a massive chamber stacked with treasure, and Kevil calmly claims it like it's his home. Ryan can't believe it, some crazy elaborate space is tucked so deep underground. While the smaller monsters shout that outsiders are never, ever allowed through these gates. Kevel suddenly swings into action and wraps Ryan's wound with its own bandages, sealing the bleeding on the spot. Spotting a huge opening, Ryan jumps in and offers to train the monster in magic, on one condition. Speculating that with 4 arms, Kevel just might pull off regeneration magic. And he bargains with the creature, "Heal my arm and I'll trade you lessons." The monster leans in and listens hard, weighing the terrifying chance that this massive spell could be real. This deal's dead simple. Ryan brings the knowledge, and Kevel brings the power. But Ryan is already cooking up an escape plan. He's ready to teleport the second they heal him. He knows trying to break out right now is useless. Down on the surface, his injury would leave him totally helpless. The fear of losing his magic crashes down on him, dragging him headfirst back into the powerless daze he can't escape. To Kevel's shock, he actually buys the deal, calling it a straight-up brilliant idea. Watching Ryan recover was the ultimate showdown, magic proving, once and for all, how powerful it really was. Kevel practically bursts with excitement the moment he hears they want to try casting spells right away. But Ryan cuts him off fast, bluntly saying, "It's not that simple." He declares that magic isn't playtime. It's a hardcore discipline you master by grinding through brutal theory and relentless practice. Kevel catches on right away and agrees to kick off the lesson from the very start. Ryan exhales in relief as the monster suddenly listens, and it hits him hard how close he was to dying just moments ago. Kevel snaps into motion and starts blasting the first lesson on natural energy, then drills home how fingers play a huge role in it, and Ryan sits faced his brand new student across the room, nodding like, "Yep, the theory checks out." Then he jumps into a live demonstration, showing exactly what you can pull off with just 5 fingers. With a flick of his hand, he demonstrates to Kevel how to make a nearby stone float. He keeps teaching and tells him he can make the object bigger, too. Unlocking the spell with more fingers doesn't just add power, it multiplies it, unleashing magic that's stronger, wilder, and far more varied. Which makes Ryan stop and think, realizing those 4 arms could unleash power so unimaginable it practically hums in his veins. His thoughts spun out at the massive, cosmic scale of what Kevel could pull off. He snaps to it. If he's going to teach regeneration magic, he needs a real starting point. But Kevel steamrolls in, grinning like he just conquered the world, and proudly shoves an insanely expanded sandwich in their faces. And Ryan tears into him for sneaking practices without permission, hammering home that he has to follow the proper steps. But Kevel insists it was pure worry. What if they ran out of food? Right then, Ryan's stomach drops as a shocking realization hits him about what the monster's strange moves were really saying. Kevel caught him staring at that massive slab of meat, and the second he asked what was wrong, everything went tense. Ryan tells him to wait, because the moment he senses the monster lurking deep in his thoughts, everything gets real fast. And Kevel shoots in a confirmation, making our boy wait in pure suspense for just a beat. The monster leans in and tells Ryan, "You don't have to carry this fight by yourself." He hands over his own power and sharp intellect, giving Ryan full reign to use them as an invited guest. Ryan's jaw drops at the surprise offer, and he can't stop asking himself if he's really about to trust this thing. And Kevel lifts the meat like it's the key, hinting it could spark arm regeneration. Our boy clocks it instantly. This spell needs a catalyst, or it won't work right, and Kevel casually drops the bombshell that he already sent his minions out to hunt for the perfect items. Ryan can't stop worrying. Did those tiny creatures even grasp a command that complicated? But Kevel shrugs it off and tells everyone they'll just test the meat for now. Right before they dive into magical research, Kevel suddenly grabs the wheel. "Hold up," he says, and insists they eat first. And as they drop into their seats for dinner, Ryan keeps his head down, locked on his notes like he's hunting answers. He grins and unveils a wild new theory, plant growth powers fused with blood-clotting magic. Right as Kevel leans in, asking if he's uncovered a real light on the regeneration spell. A week later, the minions come charging back with a huge bone, convinced it's the perfect spark to make everything click. As Ryan sneers, the painful truth hits him again. No rescue party ever showed up to save him. His research notes are packed with failed try after failed try. Over and over, he couldn't get the regeneration spell to work. In a burst of frustration, he crushes those failed theories right in his hand. But he shuts out every old failure like it doesn't even matter anymore. Teaching Kevel has turned him into a total powerhouse too, because the more he trains, the stronger he gets. His mission hasn't changed one bit: heal his arm, climb back to the surface, and make the whole world finally recognize him. But just then an unseen force lunges in from behind and snatches Kevel clean off his feet. Then it all Ryan whips around, eyes narrowing, and asks what's wrong as he steps outside to investigate. Kevil's voice snaps with urgency, screaming at him to stay frozen right where he is, no moving, not an inch. Some unseen intruder has Kevil's minions in their grip, and they're taunting them, calling them way cuter than their blasted master. Kevil plants himself in front of the intruder, and with nothing but a cold name to go on, declares her as Jolly. A goofy jester-style monster pops up, grinning from ear to ear, cheerfully declaring she finally tracked him down. She breaks into a grin, stunned to find him standing here, alive, after she was sure he'd already be dead. Kevil, now wearing a brand new form, coldly tells her, "This isn't your turf." Yet she just drifts through the air, grinning and charming him as she totally ignores the warning. She says she's been losing sleep over him ever since she realized Kevil is way weaker than she is. Her eyes squeeze shut with suspicion as she demands, point blank, what in the world he's been doing all this time. Until her eyes lock onto Ryan and she smirks, asking if he's found a new toy. Kevil's face hardens the moment she shows up, pure anger flares as her presence and questions hit. Ryan's eyes shoot wide as it clicks, everything snaps into place, and he realizes what this new monster is really about. He realizes that freaky clown monster could be the missing piece to finally unlock his healing spell. The jester monster snaps to attention at last, gaping at him like he can't believe his eyes, because a human is standing in Kevil's lair. Ryan snaps his finger at her and threatens her with death unless she heals his arm right now. Kevil is left totally speechless as Ryan explodes with a sudden, brutally aggressive demand. The jester doesn't flinch at all, he just looks downright intrigued by the boy's bold, unexpected threat. Her tiny minion panics hard, convinced Ryan's threat isn't a joke, it's the real deal. But Ryan just shrugs it off with a grin, and she realizes he was bluffing the whole time just to yank her attention his way. Jolly just drifts through the chaos, totally unbothered, and even hums a little tune like nothing's happening at all. With a frustrated little sigh, she finally turns her full attention to Ryan. Suddenly, Kevil lunges from behind and clamps a grip on Ryan, furious that he let the intruder slip away. Our boy gets hit with the accusation so hard he goes numb, then his blood turns to ice when they start blaming him for her appearance. Kevil coldly shoots Ryan a reminder. He was told, crystal clear, not to step outside. Jolly's grin curls into something sinister from afar, and it screams that Kevil should have just drained that human for his blood. Kevil slams his authority down, claiming this is his turf, then declares Ryan is his choice to make. She teases him for being stubborn, then bolts off, calling out that she wants any leftover blood in. With the gesture gone, Kevil drops his foot and pins Ryan to the ground in one brutal move. Ryan's eyes blow wide as terror slams into him. The pressure from Kevil's foot feels absolutely crushing. He clenches his teeth through the agony and it finally hits him. He's in real, deadly danger. Kevil raises his foot and tells Ryan straight up, staying here is way too dangerous for him. And he barks at our boy to get out of here right now and never, ever return. He finally admits it, keeping Ryan close was pure selfish craving, because this place is no world for a human. Pushing him to get back up to the surface before those other clowns catch his scent. Ryan drops his gaze to the ground, quiet for a second as the monster's words hit him and start grinding in his mind. He snaps to it this is his shot to break free and finally crawl back to the surface. But right as he's about to walk out, Kevil suddenly slams on the brakes and freezes in place. Because Ryan has snatched his cloak in panic, begging him, don't say it. He fires back, asking if magic is nothing more than a little hobby for something already that powerful, but for him, magic isn't just a hobby, it's life or death. Yelling that this was finally real progress and they couldn't just quit right here. After that brutal, drawn-out silence, Kevil finally leans in and flat out says he understands. Kevil admits he's just as reluctant to say goodbye, and he hates that it means breaking his promise. Telling Ryan that the idea of him dying is totally off limits and there's no way it's happening. And that he can't keep putting the boy in this kind of danger anymore. Ryan stays silent, but his mind races as he processes the monster's unexpected, yet painfully real, concern. Out of nowhere, Jolly's minion bursts in, swears he'll kill Ryan for him, then. But Jolly comes roaring back, taunting that Kevil couldn't kill the kid anyway. Ryan hauls himself up, grimly realizing he can't possibly take down a clown in this condition. He frantically ransacks his own mind, hunting for any scrap of a solution to this problem. Kevil's sharp voice slices right through his thoughts, demanding to know if Ryan's really about to tackle this all by himself again. Ryan admits right there with a defeated sigh that he's totally drawing a blank and can't think of anything to do. Then boom, Jolly's minion pops up with a grin, cheerfully yelling that he's found them. But Kevil slams in and tells Ryan to stop talking and hear out his plan instead. He suggests they team up and take down the jester together. Ryan freezes as the truth hits. He's been trying to carry it all alone again, and Kevil confirms it. There's no way he should have had to carry this by himself. A massive grin explodes across Ryan's face as he can't contain himself and throws himself in on the plan. Jolly's minion erupts in panic, screeching that Kevil has been driven mad by a human. Jolly drifts down from above, voice cracking as she admits this whole mess genuinely hurts her deeply, right to her core. She decides there's no other option, so she's taking them both out right now. Ryan steels himself for the coming brawl, because the underground's strongest magic users just so happen to be clowns. Jolly suddenly snaps out two guns, blazing into view at an insane speed, then. And Ryan can barely follow her as she whips around like a blur among four, making Kevil yank him up and drag him out of the line of fire. Ryan snaps into action and starts chanting a spell right away to strike back for the attack. Jolly just scoffs at the whole move, laughing that there's zero reason to dodge a hit that weak. Jolly's minion panics while Kevil effortlessly slips every hit, and she locks in her decision, switches targets on the spot, and declares she'll take out Kevil first. Rattled with fury, he kept griping about how brutally nimble that monster was in the fight. She fires off a blinding burst from her palms, because she knows Kevil's deadliest weakness is right in that light, so she goes for it. She blurts out she's starving and instantly wants to sink her teeth into them both. Right when her attack is about to land, something hits her. She freezes mid-swing, totally thrown off and confused. Hermione kneels and stares at the strange markings on the ground, totally lost in thought as she wonders what they mean and why they're here. Jolly finally spots it, just a giant scrap of paper, a basic stall job meant to buy time. She calls them a one-trick pony, then launches forward, ready to smash in what she swears is the final blow, only for it to be something else, but Kevil admits it, sure, Ryan's magic hits hard, but it's not strong enough to carry everything by itself. Jolly's body jolts with panic, getting smacked by the sheer, impossible energy they're blasting out in. Ryan grinned and declared, together, there's nothing we can't do. And Kevil slams the final words down, swearing they can pull off anything they can dream up. Their combined spell detonates into a massive surge of power, smashing across everything as the wave engulfs it all and the two of them slam onto the ground, drained to the bone, but still victorious. Kevil's jaw drops at their teamwork. He can't help but ask how they even pulled off that ridiculously powerful combo. But Ryan straight up admits it all was pure improv, cooked right there on the battlefield in the middle of the chaos. He snaps his gaze aside for a second, eyes full of thought, and then he says, but Kevil, now wearing a brand new form, declares he never once doubted they'd pull it off. Ryan grins, realizing magic still has him hooked, endlessly fascinating. Kevil then drops a cryptic hint. He says there's something truly remarkable waiting for them at the end, and that's when everything clicks. Which leaves Ryan completely baffled. He blurts out, wait, what do you mean by the end? The monster explains that after that fight, it won't be long before everyone else tracks their scent for sure. He told Ryan they were living in totally different worlds, and that meant their paths had to split for good. Ryan stares at the ground, crushed by the news, and in a low, shaky voice insists, no, that's not true. Ryan stomps his foot, fuming, insisting that getting split up from his friends is straight up weird. And he snaps at Kevil, telling him not to suddenly get all formal and cold like nothing's wrong. Kevil freezes for a beat, clearly stunned by the boy's fiery outburst. His minion mutters that only Kevil, out of all people, would actually befriend a human. Ryan flashes a grin, basically admitting that even someone like him isn't exactly normal either. Kevil looks straight up amused by his sudden confidence, and it totally catches Ryan off guard. But the monster's whole mood snaps serious. Then he leans in and demands how much Ryan really knows about him. He tells Ryan, don't rush this partnership decision, think it through first. At least not until he finally hears Kevil's whole story from the very start. Kevil agrees to team up with him, but only as long as Ryan's food holds out. Ryan's face drops the second he clocks the real problem hiding in that condition. Because he knows there's nowhere near enough food to keep them going for long. The whole scene snaps to a brutal new angle. One gigantic monster's foot slams down, shaking the ground as, with its owner raging at humanity, he blasts the world for one thing, magic that keeps the monsters trapped out on the surface. His minions scramble in the background, shouting that they're running out of firewood. One of them blurts out a non-stop apology to their leader, the one they call Lord Rajua. Lord Rajua, an enormous, roaring inferno of a beast, swears he'll scorch every human into ash. Then he snaps his focus to the visitor, and the moment the stranger spots him, he's revealed as Keval. Keval stands right in front of him, firing off a no-nonsense rundown about intruders in the area. He declares that there isn't a single intruder in the 10th layer, zero. Raju grins at the report, then admits the craving for human flesh is starting to gnaw at him. He taunts Keval and smugly says humans are delicious, like it's some thrilling truth he can't even fathom, since he's never once had to eat them. Then Raju snaps into action, his gaze sharpening as he demands answers about the wound on Keval's arm. Keval stares at the bandage wrapped around his arm, thrown off by the question like it hit him out of nowhere. Raju aligned in clothes and told him that if he gave it a really good sniff. Raju lunges in clothes and blurts out that he reeks of a totally distinct human scent. And one of his minions jumps in to swear it, his master's nose never, ever lies. A furious fiery beast roars like thunder, seething because a human has dared to step into its territory. Just the thought of it sent a red-hot fury ripping straight through his veins. And he barks at Keval to grab that human intruder right now. He boldly announces that he's bringing the human to his dinner table tonight. Keval's minions start to panic the second they realize a hidden human could put every monster on the line. But Keval stays cool and insists he tore the place apart, yet not a single human is anywhere. Everything points to one brutal truth. It's nothing but an illusion forged by the Lord's unholy, burning hatred. Raju snaps a brutal order at Keval, warning him that if he even thinks about disobeying, there'll be hell to pay. Keval's sister is out there right now, alone in the wild, hunting herbs by herself. That fiery lord grins like he's about to drop everything and chase her himself. He taunts Keval, sneering that she isn't as good as a human, but she's stronger than hunger itself. Keval whirls away, cuts him off, and declares, "I'm out, I'm taking my leave right now." He said it ice cold, straight to the point. He had zero time to waste on these empty threats. Roger just bursts into laughter at his defiance, daring him to keep feeding that lie to himself. As Keval turns and heads off, panic gnaws at him. He's terrified his lie is written all over his face. He realizes the moment he notices, Ryan's scent has gotten so normal in his world that he can't smell it anymore. He remembers the deal he struck with Ryan, the young magician he stumbled upon. Bandaging the boy's arm, demanding the secrets of human magic as the price. Ryan swore he'd wipe out anyone who got in his way, monster or not. But with Lord Raju now eyeing him like something, off, they can't afford to take it easy anymore. He can feel it, those peaceful hours for research are running out fast. He shoots a glance at the Minotaur, bones his minions hauled in for him. But then a minion snaps him out of it and tells him, "You don't need magic catalysts anymore." Keval knows he has to break out of this deadly mess fast, because his family's counting on him. He steels his resolve and reminds himself, Ryan's human, and that makes him the natural enemy of every monster out there. And once you've got a monster in your own bones, that truth will never, ever shift. His fist tightens with grim resolve. This brutal decision is made, and there's no turning back. Back in the lair, he spots Ryan still locked in, buried deep in his research. Keval stares him down for a beat, wearing a serious look that gives away absolutely nothing. Ryan jolts his head up, an all-new theory ignites in his mind like a flash of lightning. He announces that the time has finally come to shut down their project for good. Keval slips a hand onto his shoulder and snaps his focus to him. Ryan snaps, "Where have you been?" and Keval just shrugs, saying he was out on patrol. His minion chirps up, demanding to know what he's thinking so intensely. And Ryan admits he was stuck in thought over that massive magic sandwich they made, like his mind wouldn't stop wandering. So yeah, it's right there, magic. He can't believe it's still not rotting, even after a whole week. Keval pauses, eyes narrowing as he finally realizes the kid's right, like painfully right. Which has Ryan blurting out that there's one thing he's dying to test. He leans in and asks Keval what magic he's craving to try next. Keval looks stunned by the offer, but Ryan grabs his attention and demands he try it, anything. The monster goes dead quiet, gears turning as it wrestles with that shocking question for a brief moment. Ryan grins and tells him he can come back anytime, and Keval finally works up the courage to move forward. He leans in and asks, "Is there a spell that can knock someone out and put them to sleep?" Ryan's eyes flare with pure excitement as he confirms, lullaby magic is real. One of the minions can't wait and eagerly starts fumbling with the hand signs for the spell. Muttering under his breath that he didn't need anyone's help because he'd handle it all by himself, confident to the bone with. Which throws Ryan into a tailspin and he blurts out to Keval, "Did you just say something?" Keval totally shuts him down as he readies his own hands to cast the sleep spell. Ryan agrees to take the test, but you can tell he's got a catch riding along with it. And Kevel can't wait, he decides they're trying the spell right now, so. Ryan panics mid-sentence, begging him to wait, then Kevel snaps back, don't worry, and cuts him off with PR, swearing that as soon as it works, he'll haul him awake immediately. Our boy erupts in a furious scream, because he finally realizes they've completely misread everything he's been trying to say. In the very next second, a wild burst of magical energy detonates around them, swallowing everything in chaos. The minions freeze in terror, staring at it, praying that wasn't lullaby magic as Ryan sprawled on the ground, breathless, shouting that they had to restart the search. Kevel leans down toward him, eyes locked, and demands, "What do you mean by that?" Ryan leans in and tells you the wild truth. Kevel's magic isn't just different from human magic, it's built from a whole other kind of power. That's the real reason the lullaby spell backfired, and why the sandwich never rotted. Replaying his theory that 4 extra arms could pull off real, top-tier human spells. But now he finally gets it, if their formulas clash, their experiments are dead on arrival. It totally makes sense, magic would twist and change between different species, of course, and he's furious with himself for missing that obvious truth. Out of nowhere, another blast smashes into him, and it sounds like pure rage. He's screaming through the pain, but Kevel shrugs it off, saying it was just a test, checking whether his fingers were twisted the wrong way. The monster mutters that he can't touch lullaby magic at all, because one wrong move and it turns lethal fast. And Ryan catches him mutter that the whole thing is just unfortunate. Ryan jerked himself upright, rage blazing as he snapped that he wanted answers. What did that comment even mean? Calling out that Kevel's been acting weird ever since he rolled back in. He fires the monster a reminder. He's been obsessed with magic ever since day one, like, seriously, ever since he can remember. Yelling that calling any magic unfortunate just isn't him at all. Kevel tells Ryan, I just wanted you to finally get the rest you desperately need. But our boy gets completely flustered when someone yells that it's a terrible excuse. But Ryan clocks the excuse instantly, and he can tell something's seriously off. He forces himself upright, refusing to let the conversation die right here. Kevel fires back that our boy hit his physical wall, though Ryan swears he hasn't done anything yet. Ryan admits he's been locked in non-stop research for so long he's completely ditched sleep and rest. He reminds Ryan of the brutal magic he unleashed on Jolly, because that power left him utterly drained. Kevel claims that a little rest could unlock better ideas, but Ryan snaps back with an immediate, no-way denial, declaring that this talk between them isn't even close to finished. The monster leans in and demands, was my explanation really that disappointing for you? But Kevel can't fool himself. He knows he's a terrible liar, and deep down he's genuinely terrified for the boy. Ryan clocks it right away and asks Kevel what's wrong, because he's so zoned out it's scaring him. He meets Kevel's eyes and bluntly asks, let me take some of your burden, please, so he can finally help. He's adamant that even if the problem looks hopeless or outright impossible, he'll still push through. A confident grin bursts onto his face as he tells her, don't worry, we'll fix it together. He steps in front of Kevel and dares him, so you're still claiming we live in different worlds. Screaming with passion that none of it matters to them anymore. Kevel goes dead quiet, like the boy's words hit him right in the chest. He finally lifts his gaze to him, and fresh resolve burns bright in his eyes, admitting that until right now, he still thought they were from totally different worlds. Then bam, he suddenly crumples to the ground, and he blurts out to Ryan that he doesn't want this taken the wrong way. As he leaned in and told the boy, you should have made it back up to the surface all those years ago. A chilling darkness drops over them as Kevel's clawed hand swells into view, towering right in front of their faces. His sharp fingers shot down toward the exhausted, stunned boy. He looms over Ryan for a beat, and you can't read a single thing in his intentions. Then boom, his hand crashes down, and his own minion's head pops clean off. Ryan snaps his eyes upward in total disbelief as the tiny creature's head tumbles clean off. The other minions quake with terror, staring around like, what's shaking everything right now? Then boom, the earth splits open under their feet with a deafening roar. Then a gigantic, blazing beast barrels into the cavern, tearing through everything in its path, laying bare Lord Raju's furious face, the kind that screams trouble. Kevel's jaw drops when the fiery lord shrugs it off and says he was just out for a walk, but the tense look on his face screams that he already knows why he's really here. Raju's story spins around Kevel's sister, who finally confirms his suspicions about a human. Then he swings Ryan up in the air and taunts Kevel non-stop for tripping over something that's barely anything. Ryan glares up at the beast, and the second he does, he recognizes Lord Rajua, the notorious nightmare everyone fears. Keval begs the Lord to free his sister before he even takes the human, but Rajua shrugs off the request on the spot, telling them they don't need to rush. He lets go of her and Keval instantly barrels to her side, checking fast to make sure she's really okay. A tense silence slams down the moment Keval whips around and faces the fiery lord head-on. Roger leans in, stares down at Ryan, and laughs as Ryan whines that he's barely even worth a snack. That massive beast rips into a ferocious roar, jaws wide open as if it's about to swallow him whole. And then SNIK, a razor-sharp blade snaps out from Keval's arm with a loud metallic clang. He shocked his sister, who stood on the sidelines watching in total disbelief. He hacks through Raju's arm and Raju's grip snaps, sending the boy tumbling free. Keval lunges in at the last second and snatches Ryan just before he slams into the ground with a brutal thud. His eyes burned with cold, unshakable resolve to protect him. Lord Rajua locks eyes with them, his face twisted in stunned shock and blazing fury. As Ryan crumples on the ground, Keval's sister shrieks her brother's name like it's the last thing she has. Raju already snapped back, pinned Keval down, and barked that he wanted the truth, what the hell he was doing. He leans in and asks if Keval truly grasps what his actions are about to unleash. Staring at it, wondering if he really was trying to save a human. With Keval pinned to the ground, he snarls that this wasn't how he planned it, he just changed his mind. He breaks it down, turns out he's not what you thought at all, he's just like someone once said, right about that eccentric monster himself. He blurts that he's sickened by the idea of letting the boy die, but Raju snorts at the idea, calling his sudden change of heart total nonsense. The fiery lord bellows that Keval is eccentric, he's just an idiot who should be burned. His sister can only stare in sheer terror as the lord's fury crashes down like a storm. Roger cracks his neck and goes for a brutal, bone-jarring blow at him, but then something hits him mid-step, and total confusion snaps into place. Ryan jolts up on his feet, staring at his own body like, what the hell is happening to me? Keval jolts as he looks over, and realizes the boy is already awake, staring right back. Raju snaps him off, then swears he'll handle that little one later. But Ryan glares back with pure defiance, daring the massive beast to shut up. He jabs a finger, barking at the massive furball to back off and get away from Keval. The fiery lord just explodes into mocking laughter at his own words and is blown away by the kid's courage and vows to savor every single bite. Ryan refuses to back off, again and again shouting the same demand, back off, get away from his friend. He rockets forward with a sudden burst of speed and raw power, and even Keval looked stunned when the boy suddenly struck. In this new twist, Keval fires a question at Ryan. How is he even still standing when his strength is completely gone? Ryan admits straight to the truth that he knows better than anyone that he's been grinding himself into the ground. But when Keval gets insulted and death is right on his doorstep, he refuses to stand there and do absolutely nothing. He has to help no matter what. He yells, swearing he'll never become one of those giant idiots who just leaves a friend behind. Keval smirks and agrees no, he's not an idiot, he's just got his own brand of wild, eccentric. Ryan flashes a grin and declares, see, we're the perfect match after all. Lord Rajua stands in the distance, and then the truth creeps in slow, sharp, and terrifying. And then it hits him, Keval's been cooking up his entire plan this whole time. Blasting him for teaming up with a human just to take him down. Ryan stares in total disbelief at the accusation, his mind racing, because part of him can't help thinking, was that really the plan the whole time? Keval snaps and admits Rajua's jumping to conclusions, because that's exactly where this story is headed anyway. The two of them stand shoulder to shoulder, facing down the fiery lord like a locked-in wall. Keval bursts into motion, sprinting straight at the massive beast as Ryan snaps it into focus, he realizes this is the legendary blazing lion he only read about in a book. He taunts the beast, pointing at the book and sneering, it says a magician already beat you. With a snap of his book, he can't help but wonder, could this one earn him a reward too? Ryan slams into a chant and unleashes a brutal spell that yanks the wind over to his side. Tearing the air apart, he unleashed a colossal crystal shard, fueled by raw magic. He jabs a finger at his enemy with pure defiance, daring that furball to come at him. But then his eyes blow wide with pure terror at what comes next as Raju unleashes a furious roar and shatters the spell like it's nothing. The fiery lord leans over him and snaps that the attack is a total letdown. He shuts the boy down cold, sneering that he's not even worth chewing. Ryan's mind spins with one question. If he's feeling let down, does that mean it actually looked damn impressive? And that confident grin lights back up as he announces it's an absolute win. Keval gapes at the boy, stunned by the wild logic that makes zero sense, and until Rajua finally snaps out of it and realizes the whole thing was nothing but a masterfully staged diversion. The Lord roars that every move he makes, every puny attack, will bounce before it ever touches him. Ryan admits his own arms can't possibly reach the beast, but right when Raju least expects it, Keval pops up behind him and whispers a lullaby just for him. With a brutal, soul-shattering slash, Keval drove the blade straight across Raju's face, making the fiery lord grunt as his eye flared, pain crashing in and sheer shock ripping through him. Ryan could only stand there, frozen in shock, staring from the side at the attack's brutal, earth-shaking force. Keval clocked how brutally tough his opponent was, then immediately set his eyes on the next move in his game plan. Then he fired off a wild question to the beast, how it wanted to get hit with something way bigger. Ryan couldn't stop himself. He smirked as he nodded along, admitting it was a seriously fantastic idea. But Keval yanked him up into the air so fast the young boy didn't even have time to react. Raju's curse ripped up from the ground beneath them, and the moment he realized their impossible plan had finally kicked into motion, everything changed. In his eyes you could see the two of them locked in, poised, breathless, and ready to strike. And his eyes widened in disbelief as Keval got ready to launch the boy forward. That blazing lion roared defiantly, swearing there was no way he'd ever get beaten by scum like them, but Ryan only grinned back, daring him to try that theory out for real. So enraged by their confidence, Rajua dared them to keep yapping, and Keval hurled Ryan forward like a cannonball, spinning him through a cyclone of swirling energy. Ryan strained with all his might, fighting the Lord's overwhelming power as he desperately tried to hold his spell together. Raju let out a loud laugh at the boy, sneering, "Is that all you've got?" A thunderous burst of pure power detonated between them, blasting the cavern apart and rattling everything to the core. And the Lord's eyes blazed with pure hatred as he swore to wipe out every last one of them. But Keval stayed unnervingly calm and calmly admitted he'd plunged headfirst into their perfectly set trap. The ground ripped open under him, and Rajua crashed headfirst into the brand new chasm. As Keval watched him drop from above, his face went stone-cold, unreadable, yet weirdly calm. He said that beast definitely wasn't getting out of that hole without a fight. That shaky ground ended up being the perfect piece of his master plan. Then he snapped his focus to Ryan and demanded he apologize to him first, while Keval's sister stared on in shock, he finally confessed he used Ryan as bait to protect his family. Ryan stared up at him, utterly stunned that this sudden, out-of-nowhere apology actually came. And Keval just looked over and straight up asked what in the world he could possibly mean by that question. Ryan snapped with pure frustration, demanding to know why they'd locked him inside the dark room and kept him in the dark. "Keval, don't forget, he's the one who drilled into you that you never, ever face your problems alone." Keval snapped quiet for a heartbeat, stunned speechless by the boy's fierce, heartfelt words, and Ryan wouldn't stop insisting the plan would have crushed it, if only he'd known from the very start that he was the bait. He told Keval, "Honestly, I should have gotten you by now." He thrust his hand out and demanded a promise. Next time he'd spill everything. A bright grin ripped across his face as he shouted that they could do anything together. Keval shot a quick glance back, a tiny smile curling beneath his mask as he called out Ryan's name. He admitted Ryan was just as eccentric, only his brand of weird was completely his own. And Ryan slapped his hand in a handshake, thanking him from the bottom of his heart, and their bond suddenly felt unbreakable. But that peaceful moment was ripped apart the instant a whole new voice cut through the silence. Keval's sister stared at Ryan with razor-sharp suspicion and demanded to know, word for word, who he really was. She demanded to know why a human warrior was down here, trading blows right beside her brother, and for a breath, even the air seemed to stop. Utterly lost, she snapped out to Keval, and he instantly rushed in to calm her down. Even one of those tiny minions looked totally stunned by how fast everything spiraled into this weird, new mess. As Keval steadied the drained Ryan, he demanded Ryan's sister set up a bed for him first. He said the timing was dead on because he was already about to explain everything. Telling her it was gonna be a long story and begging her, listen close, really close. He vowed to spill every secret about himself to her, right down to his dear friend who'd fought at his side. Then the whole vibe flips to a calm town, and kids' laughter echoes through the streets like a warm, harmless song. where a young boy with Ryan's face threw himself into a rage, swinging a stick at a blazing lion. He erupted into hearty laughter, acting like he'd been totally beaten in their grand, over-the-top pretend battle. While the other kids were celebrating their win, they shouted that the next team was stepping up for the challenge. Back then, a much younger Ryan got yanked over by the other kids who were playing nearby, and he swung his head toward them, eyes tired and visibly annoyed. But one of the boys shot in front of him in a flash, shutting him down and telling him he wasn't allowed to join in. They dragged Ryan to the sidelines, then the whole group started chanting he was nothing but a weakling. From afar, the kids whispered that he was so painfully slow they couldn't even spare a thought or make room for him in their games. And he watched them cosplay as heroes, even though only a handful ever become real warriors. With his chest aching, he spun around and raced back to his family's tiny diner. As soon as his guardians let him in, they practically bombarded him with questions. Did he have fun out there playing with his friends? But Ryan just muttered a quiet yeah, sounding way less sure than he wanted to. And the two adults traded a quick worried glance at his clearly crushed, downcast mood. The man did everything he could to lift his spirits, then begged him for help at the weekend market. And just like that, his 11th birthday was barreling in so fast it practically felt inevitable. But Ryan just shrugged and said his aunt and uncle could handle it just fine without him, swearing he'd stay back and guard the house himself, no matter what. Suddenly, a bright, cheerful woman tore through the door, and the young boy jumped hard, because she showed up out of nowhere, and with nerves rattling her voice, she asked if the diner had any silo bottles. Her whole body lit up with joy the moment they confirmed it. She'd been peeking over that counter, and the excitement hit like a spark. The woman burst into loud cheers, shouting that she'd finally found exactly what she'd been searching for. Right as she started to savor her drink, Ryan couldn't help but wonder who this mysterious stranger really was. Right then, another guy stormed into the diner and shouted at her, "Ms. Jean." Ryan's guardian froze in pure disbelief. The instant he clocked that famous name, recognition hit like a punch. And just like that, she turned out to be none other than the legendary magician, Jean Seraphy. Ryan caught her words. She said she was drinking tonight because of an investigation coming later. He couldn't wrap his head around it. This carefree woman turned out to be a powerhouse magician. His guardians started whispering that her investigation could only mean one thing, the blazing lion. And his guardian didn't just bring the blazing lion, he watched it torch the orchards of Silo Village too. Jean slammed the table in total shock, demanding to know if those precious grapevines got wrecked too. The damage was so brutal that wine production got slammed to a stop for years. And she shrieked with pure heartbreak, yelling that it was her favorite brand of wine. Then bam, an amazing idea hit her. She could use magic to grow even more grapevines. She realized in seconds that there was no way she could pull off something that huge all alone. From the top of the stairs, Ryan snapped at the weird magician to shut it and stop her endless rambling. And Jean snapped his head up, stunned that the kid's sudden interruption had hit out of nowhere. He jerked back in shock when her laser-focused stare slammed straight into him, and she marched right into his space, demanding he help her build a brand new vineyard. Ryan's brain just short-circuited. He was hit with an insanely weird request, and he got it out of nowhere. She snatched both of his hands and declared with total confidence that they were made for magic. She told his guardians loud and clear that the boy had a natural gift for it, but Ryan shut that idea down fast, saying someone like him could never, ever pull it off. When doubt hit, Jean just shoved a tiny notebook into his hands, and he realized it was her personal notebook, stuffed with her own secret magic made just for her. She strutted up to him and told him, "Read this," bragging that she'd nailed every single detail in her summary. And when she told him he could keep it while she was in town for the week, confusion hit him hard. She came in fast, then bolted right back out, telling them to stash a bottle of wine for her for tomorrow. Leaving Ryan utterly stunned, staring at the book like he couldn't make sense of a single thing that just happened. Magicians were hailed by everyone as the ones who could save the entire human world. That grand title felt like the exact opposite of who he ever wanted to be. He tried to knock out for the night, but those strange woman's words kept slamming back into his mind like a haunting echo. His eyes snapped wide open, and his mind sprinted nonstop, hunting for even 1 second of peace. Finally, he slipped out of bed, and his unstoppable curiosity yanked him into action. He told himself just a little peek, and started reading the book right before bed. And he kept telling himself, just take a quick look, right up until sleepiness started creeping in. Ryan dropped into his chair and started digging through the very history of magic itself, like he was hunting answers with every line he read. realizing that its insane power comes straight from nature, then gets guided and unleashed through human hands. The book laid out how mixing finger combos could summon over 1,000 spells, and he got totally lost in it all, staring like it was a dream he couldn't wake up from. Then in a surreal flash, he pictured himself floating while reading about levitation, and the second he shaped the hand sign, a pencil on his desk shot upward toward him. Next morning, Jean just showed up out of nowhere, snapping him out of his practice like a jump scare. And the pencil clattered to the floor on the spot, shattering the delicate spell in an instant. But Jean flashed him a warm smile, praising his obvious natural talent, and she was shocked he worked that hard. Then she grabbed him by the attention and warned him to finally get more sleep. Her smile vanished in an instant, seriousness slammed onto her face as she got ready to fire a question at him, but Ryan was so locked into the book that he brushed it off like, "I'm right on the good part." Jean froze for a split second, his focus so locked in and fierce that it felt unshakable, as a huge, knowing grin creeps across her face. She straight up bragged to herself that, yeah, her talent-spotting instincts were the real deal. Downstairs, the family diner was packed and buzzing with customers like it always was. One of the usual crowd members swung by for his morning meal, just like he always did, and he froze because Ryan was sitting at the table, completely locked in on his book like nothing else existed. His uncle told him straight up that Ryan had been acting like this since yesterday, and the customer just couldn't stop noticing how the boy had suddenly turned super studious. Ryan was so locked into his reading that he didn't even realize his food was right there in front of him. Thrown into a totally different world, he had no clue what was happening, while his guardians leaned in, watching him with sharp, curious eyes. Meanwhile, the other diner patrons couldn't stop panicking over the blazing lion's latest mayhem. But Ryan's eyes blazed with a brand new, unstoppable determination as he pored over a page in Jean's notebook, soaking up the magic behind plant growth. He tried to cast the spell on his own, but total confusion hit when the results just wouldn't come. Staring at the math like it should have worked, he couldn't understand why absolutely nothing was happening, even though he'd used the right formula. He finally realized the only thing he might have been missing was his own imagination. Jean suddenly burst up beside him and tossed out some seriously valuable advice. She leaned in and told him the key was simple: picture the end result in your head and pour every ounce of your willpower into it. And that pure technique can only carry a magician so far before the magic runs out. She fired up and insisted the last, most crucial step is to genuinely believe he'll succeed. And don't just pray the plant grows, picture it thriving right now, already reaching for the light. Ryan froze for a second, trying to take in her bizarre yet absolutely crushing words. He imagined that tiny sprout turning into a full-blown plant right inside his mind. With a fresh burst of focus, he snapped those hand signs into place again. A surge of pure energy blasted from his fingertips straight into the little pot, causing the plant to burst out of the ground in an instant, leaving him totally stunned. Jean lit up and praised him, saying he'd caught those brutal concepts faster than anyone could believe. And Ryan threw himself back into training with even more fire than ever before. He was so locked in on his training that he didn't even catch Jean's next tip. As she told him night was creeping in, he felt the push to cut his losses and head home before the darkness won. But her smile vanished, serious now, swearing she'd never be beaten by some kid. That night she sharpened her resolve. She'd track down her deadly target and end them for good. Meanwhile, Ryan drifted to the edge of town, still completely swallowed by the magic book and clueless about where to go next. With a crushing sigh, he realized he had to hand that notebook back to her tomorrow. Russell in the bushes finally spotted it. Jean was back to watching him again, and he leaned in and asked straight up, was she really working, or was she just locked in on him? Suddenly, Ryan's eyes bulged, pure, crushing tears froze him in place. Right as those other kids from before trapped him in the alley, they spat insults at him and labeled him a weakling. He froze in shock at what they were gripping in their hands as the lead bully sneered, asking if he was just pretending to be a magician. He scoffed when the boy tried to warn Ryan not to get cocky, just because he was clutching that little book. Ryan just stood there frozen as they threatened to slap him with a painful lesson. With a sudden burst of motion, they all surged forward, arms stretching, desperate to snatch that precious notebook before it slipped away. Their taunts slammed into him again and again, insisting he'd never, ever become a real magician. The bullies swore they'd crush his confidence for good, so he'd never get cocky around them again, and hope vanished from Ryan's face as they crashed in on him and left him totally overwhelmed. Then asterisk thud, a sudden footstep in the alley shattered their cruel, pointless game dead in its tracks, and Jean was going nonstop, barking that she couldn't find what she was looking for. Her face snapped with surprise the instant she spotted the scene unfolding right in front of her, and she spotted Ryan cowering in an alley, demanding to know what on earth he was doing there. She breezed up and asked if he was finally taking a breather from his magic training. But Ryan stared up at her and flat out said magic was impossible for someone like him. He laid out every insecurity like a confession, calling himself short, slow, and painfully clumsy, and left it hanging there. And Jean just grinned like, "Who told you all that ridiculous nonsense?" She leaned in and said that with 2 arms, magic turns literally anything into reality. And when she spoke up, a tiny spark of hope snapped back into Ryan's eyes, but deep down, he still couldn't wrap his head around the idea that he'd ever become a real magician. He insisted those other kids were way better for the job than he ever could be. And Jean just shrugged and said it was a damn shame he'd been judging himself like that right up until the end. Right before he threw up a hand sign and declared it was goodbye. Ryan snapped his head up in total disbelief, completely blindsided by the sudden words that hit her mouth. Ryan stared up at the magician, utterly stunned by her sudden final goodbye, and he demanded to know if she was about to cast magic and wipe his memory clean, too. And Jean's eyes widened. He couldn't believe he spotted that spell formula so fast. She realized that picking just one spell out of 1,000 isn't something you can do without serious nerve. Yet Ryan somehow pulled it off and she couldn't help but press him. "So, why do you think you can do it?" The young boy could only stare back at her, totally unsure how to answer her question, and she told him it was simple and then hit him with the real reason. He'd been working his ass off. Jean warned him not to take anyone's word unless they'd actually witnessed his dedicated efforts for himself from. She reminded him he can't even imagine being a magician because he never even tries. Her eyes burned brighter as she demanded, point blank, what he had to do to finally become one. That he has to keep picturing himself as a terrifyingly powerful magician. If doubt ever creeps in and tells him his imagination isn't enough, he'll freeze because he won't move forward. And with a sly smile, she told him, "If you can pull this off, then you'll be set." Then he finally gets it, he can pull off anything, and she swears it'll happen for real. Ryan clenched his fist, letting her powerful words hit so hard they sank deep into his bones. And when he finally jolted awake, that memory crumbled away, leaving him staring at the question in his mind. Why was he suddenly remembering his master? Kevel hoisted him on his back, lined in close, and kept asking if he was awake, how he felt, and Ryan swore he was fine, but his focus snagged on something else the moment it caught his eye. He froze in shock when he realized those monsters were getting chased by a massive, terrifying brute. One of the tiny creatures traveling with them quickly blurted out what was going on. And it hit them. Raju, the beast they just took down, was the monster's boss all along. Taking him down didn't just solve anything, it cooked up a whole worse nightmare for themselves. As every monster around him snapped into a frenzy and turned brutally hostile. They'd already left most of them in the dust, but Raju's right-hand man, Gardy, was still hot on their heels. Then the beast roared at Kevel, blasting him with accusations of treason against the entire monster world. Kevel brushed off the empty threat, snapping that he was done hearing all this monster world talk, and then he shifted his focus to Ryan, demanding to know what the boy planned to do next off. It gave him a way back to the surface if he could run from the danger in time. But Gardy warned them that no matter whether they duel or run, the same nightmare would come right back because Raju is still alive and he's coming back with fresh, boiling hatred to hunt them down for good. Kevel nodded and said he could probably get Ryan out of this mess, right up until the catch came crashing in. Rajua keeps saying he'll come for revenge eventually, right there on the surface world too. Ryan dropped his gaze for a second, and the weight of this new info slammed into him hard, then. But he snapped his head up, fresh determination blazing, and declared they had to fight, no question about it. He told them that if Raju is coming for them, then this is their golden opening to strike, right on that beat. Swearing he'll crush the blazing lion before it ever claws its way up to the surface. One of the little minions stared, totally stunned by how suddenly the boy's confidence hit like a wave. And Kevel's sister stared him down, skeptical as she questioned every word of his wild, bold claim. But Kevel was jumping with pure joy, his spirit roaring with praise for Ryan's brilliant idea, and Ryan said he's got even more magic to master, and he's determined to protect his family too. He teased Kevel, accusing him of setting a trap just to watch whether he'd bolt and run away too. Kevel, drop him, he's gonna take the fight into his own hands and be the one to smash their enemy. With a fierce stare, he snapped that he needed to prove he wasn't just all talk. Kevil's sister's voice sliced right through the moment, because she'd been listening to every word of their whole exchange as she and her minion shrugged off their plan as nothing but an impossible pipe dream. She snapped them back to reality. Right after they peeled off, they slammed into Rajua with everything they had, and it left him injured and insisting there was absolutely zero chance the two of them could pull off a win from here. Gardy leaned back at a distance and sneered, agreeing with a smirk that Kevil's sister was the brains of the family. But Ryan shot back with fierce determination, swearing it wasn't impossible at all. As he replayed his master's final secret, mentally blazing the exact outcome so vividly it felt real. With that thought, Ryan snatched a tiny, forgettable pebble off the ground like it mattered. With a steel-hard stare burning in his eyes, he yanked it back and launched it straight ahead, sending the tiny rock rocketing straight at the guard, who's suddenly stunned and completely lost. The beast snarled at the pathetic diversion, barking that it would never work as, while one of the little minions watches every second, he leans in, glued to the whole scene as it explodes around him. And Kevil's sister flat out admitted that trying to stop the boy now was completely pointless. She even muttered that Ryan is way more stubborn than she'll ever be. Then we jump back to Jean's fearless smile and her promise, "You can do anything." He replayed her simple, trusting words from all those years ago in his mind, and then in the present he nodded, admitted he got it, and promised he'd give it a shot. Ryan slammed a hand sign into place, and spell Formula 17 erupted, fueling a wild substance expansion, making that little pebble blaze and swell at once in midair. And Gardy's eyes go wide, because the sight in front of him is totally impossible. That tiny pebble exploded into a monstrous boulder, towering over the terrified monster and crushing the space right out from under it. Kevil and his sister froze in shock as that insane surge of power lit the whole scene up. Ryan leaned in and told Kevil, "I just woke up from the most nostalgic dream, like my past came rushing back." He clenched his fist, swore he'd take down Rajua, and promised he'd rip Kevil's arm back, telling himself his master would be crushed if he ever doubted himself again. Kevil clocked it right away. Ryan's got to have a master who's seriously rock solid and fully trustworthy. But right in the middle of Ryan's sentence, Kevil's sister suddenly yanked him away mid-word, and they yanked him out of there before he could get a real answer. The moment the crew noticed more pursuers pouring up from the cliffs below, they bolted for their lives real fast. They finally clocked it. The massive hole they just blasted was the perfect shortcut to push Geo even deeper into the unknown. Kevil snapped, "Cling to me tight," for the brutal long descent that was about to crush them, right here, right now, holding on to him like your life depended on it. They braced themselves and leaped into the darkness waiting right below. As they dropped into the endless darkness, Kevil clutched Ryan and the tiny creature like his life depended on it. And even now, he keeps nudging Ryan to teach him expansion magic just as soon as he can. Ryan's jaw dropped at the fact he was talking magic, but he still nodded and happily promised to teach him. The story snapped into a flashback, young Ryan sleeping soundly in his bed, looking completely peaceful with Jean's notebook sat right beside him as the last light of a grueling study night finally faded. He had devoured every single page of her special, handwritten notebook, while Jean's team tore into her for showing up late to their meeting, forcing her to take the heat. Her colleague snapped at her on the spot, accusing her of wandering around and drinking until now, but she flashed a mischievous grin and said she was just out scouting fresh talent. He urged her to sit down, and when he said it, he referenced a maze, one Chris was supposedly tied to. Jean dropped into her seat, and the moment she started business, her expression sharpened like a blade. She kicked off the briefing by laying out their usual patrol routes for the investigation. Then one of her men rushed back and swore the Eastern District was spotless, no threats anywhere. Right after they checked and confirmed the Western District was quiet too, someone immediately chimed in, no delay. And the Southern District Patrol returned empty-handed, no leads, no sightings, nothing to report. Jean seethed with frustration when a whole week of searching hit, and they still had zero leads. After the war, they only had one bitter complaint, no forces left to dig underground and look for what was lost. One guy demanded, is this monster really that deadly? Because he hadn't seen it with his own eyes yet, but another warrior swore it was insanely powerful, so tough that even a direct hit barely left a scratch. Jean burst in to explain the real danger wasn't its strength, it was its brain, its smarts, its sharp, unhuman intelligence, and that's where the real scare started to hit. They were saying the beast wasn't rampaging at all. It was unnervingly calm, cool, and fully in control. Worse yet, it looked like it wasn't just sniffing around, it was genuinely hungry to understand her magic. A terrifying monster's vision burst into view as she snapped that they couldn't just abandon it. It straight up warned them if it ever figures out how to cast magic, they'll get stomped completely. With fierce resolve blazing in her eyes, she swore she'd destroy it before it ever had the chance to happen. In that sudden flashback, the blazing lion roared like it was possessed, swearing it would wipe them all out with its own claws. And Ryan broke it down, him and Kevel sprinting after that beast deeper and deeper into the underground. He refused to sit around for an attack, so he made the call. They'd come to him instead. But Ryan stared at his injured hand and realized, in that crushing moment, his power just wasn't enough. And with that, he vowed to grow way stronger, because the only way he'd finally take down Rajua was by getting unstoppable. He never once doubted it. His ultimate goal was still the same as day one, but before anything else, he had to figure out how to heal his broken arm and still find a way to help Kevel. He was suddenly spotted sprawled on the ground, begging for just a little more time. Kevel's sister ripped into him for lounging around inside enemy territory, and then Ryan shot back that he could barely contain himself, because for a magician, the arms aren't just tools, they're their entire life. With his powerful magic gone, he knew they were doomed. Rajua would crush them without mercy. Then the whole scene snapped into a flashback, young Ryan suddenly blurting out, "Are you really leaving, Master?" Jean admitted she'd only come to town for a survey mission in the first place, and her colleagues snapped that she dragged her stay out just to do Ryan a favor. The boy asked when he'd see her again, but she dodged the answer with nothing but vague hints. And she just smiled, wondering when that soon would finally show up for real, like right after that, saying she couldn't wait to watch his wild imagination turn into something real right in front of her. She thrust a tiny parting gift into his hands, right before she had to run. A tiny pendant was clenched in his fist as her team snapped, "Hurry." Ryan could only stand there, staring as she walked away, catching every last second of her in town, and with a bright grin and a cheerful wave, Jean bade him farewell for now. Right now, Ryan realized there was only one rule. He wouldn't be able to go back until his arm finally healed. Still crushed with disappointment, he got carried by Kevel and his sister. Out of all those tiny creatures, only magic stood up. Saying it like a spell was the only move he had left right now. Until they finally stumbled on a spot that looked safe, just for a little while. Ryan jolted his head up, eyes bulging in total disbelief like he couldn't even process what he was seeing. They stepped into a gigantic, glowing cavern, where massive luminous trees lit everything up like a living dream. A stunning, impossible forest grows wild far underground, thriving in the pitch dark beneath the earth. He could barely wrap his head around it. The sight was muttering, "Yeah, there's a whole forest underground." And he stared in shock as the giant trees seemed to grow straight down from the sky, like gravity had flipped on its head. He snapped his head toward Kevel, stunned. Then a strange chime rang out, cutting him off as the moment hung on a knife edge. Then a massive clawed foot slammed down right in front of them. A giant deer spirit made of wood and crystal towered above them in calm silence, and Ryan panicked, firing questions at the air like, how in the world is this supposed to be safe? He snapped into spellcasting right away, hand poised and formula trembling on his lips, but Kevel's sister yanked him back and pinned his hand down tight, stopping him in an instant. Kevel didn't flinch. He calmly greeted the massive creature, and it turned out Lord Taja clearly knew him. Then the forest spirit's eye snapped onto Ryan, and in an instant it clocked him for what he was, a human. Ryan cowered behind his friends, heart hammering as he nervously blurted, "Kevel, what are you doing?" But the creature just ordered Kevel to take care of things, completely unfazed by their presence. Ryan just stared, stunned, because the giant monster kept backing off instead of lunging at them. Kevel and the others called a quick break, and Ryan just stared, utterly lost. Kevel's sister wanted to know if he recognized the place, and he just shrugged like, "Yeah, I know this." And Ryan dropped into his seat, gears in his head grinding as the new info hit like a shockwave. Scratching drawings in the dirt, he demanded, "So this is Raju, since his lair isn't the absolute lowest level." And Kevel chose to dig deeper into the boy's crude, simple drawing. He dragged his sharp finger across the dirt below the sketch, carving a clean line into the ground, explaining that the monster's real home isn't just somewhere nearby, it's way deeper than anyone ever thought. He spilled the truth. That so-called bottom Ryan thought he'd found is only a tiny sliver of their world. And Ryan's eyes went wide with pure, gut-churning terror at the terrifying size of their problem. Ryan blurted out in panic that they had to move, because more fighting was coming and they couldn't afford to waste a second, but Kevel calmly leaned in and told him, "No, they don't really have to fight much at all," which left Ryan totally baffled. He leaned in and told me, "Up there, Those hot-blooded monsters tear through the sky down here, though the creatures are calm and Ryan finally realized that the creature they'd spotted earlier wasn't some random fluke at all. Still rattled by it, he shoved the confusion aside and told them, "We're moving forward from here." But Kevel dropped to one knee and snapped the boys, full attention on him with nothing but his name, as he demanded to know what he'd do if there was a way to regrow flesh, no magic involved. Ryan froze in pure shock, staring at the question like it couldn't possibly be real, because he could barely wrap his head around a method like that existing. And Kevel admitted he didn't have a clue, yet that one certain place might still be hiding the answer they're desperate for. Meanwhile, Kevel's sister shadowed their talk from afar, silent as the moment stretched, watching, waiting, saying nothing. As Kevel finally spills the name of that secret spot, the place is called Convection. He explained it's the legendary place where monster lives are forged, and where they finally end. And Ryan couldn't stop speculating. If this is where they were born, then it's gotta be the place where they're made. Kevel just listened to the boy's theory, hummed like he was weighing every word, and then gave his response. Watching Ryan's face light up in shock when Kevel started telling him about those ancient legends. He admitted he was burning with curiosity about this healing method that doesn't use magic, but deep down he wondered if it was nothing more than an ancient legend, one that had been whispered and passed down for generations. He just laughed it off, insisting there's no way a story that perfectly lines up like that could be real. Right then, Kevel's sister lunged in from behind, yanking him mid-step and leaving him totally stunned as she blurted, asking. She pushed him to explain what was wrong and grilled him about whether he was really trying to say he didn't believe her brother. She raised a wild, tentacled plant and quizzed him, had he never heard of the Palpagrass Expo, saying the younger and fresher the plant is, the stronger its healing power becomes. She promised she'd heal his hand, then the plant tightened around his wound like it meant business. And Ryan stared in shock as that bizarre plant sealed his wound on the spot, instant healing like magic. Kevel's sister stared right back, her eyes blazing as she confessed, no lies, she was genuinely jealous. She finally admitted it, seeing how Ryan could still get genuinely surprised by their world was something that made envy flare in her chest. Ryan thought she was mocking him, until she straight up insisted it was a gift made to help him learn new things. She teased that she could barely wait to see what kind of reaction he'd throw when they finally hit the convection, saying that once she locked in her root in her memory, nothing at all could ever catch her off guard again. And when Ryan finally caught what she meant, she drove the point home. Convection wasn't some bedtime myth, it was real. Kevel spilled the truth, Convection is a real place, and it's where both he and his sister were born. And he swore that with his guidance, Ryan would finally make it to Convection too. Ryan could only stand there wordless as this bombshell hit him like gravity, pulling the truth deeper and deeper in. Kevel admitted the unknown scared him too, then leaned in and asked, wasn't he excited as well? He said the thrill of uncovering the truth crushes any fear that tries to creep in. But his sister just let out a heavy sigh like, you're the only one who gets pumped about this stuff. Ryan flashed a weak smile and said, Kevel hasn't changed a single bit. It had him staring in disbelief, wondering what kind of world ever shaped someone like Kevel. His sudden curiosity blindsided both Kevel and his sister, and Ryan grinned and said they'd never find out if his arm could be healed unless they tried, so they had to Geo. Kevel stared down at the boy and instantly knew his determination was back, stronger than ever. Right when their conversation was really heating up, these tiny curious forest spirits popped in out of nowhere. Ryan's jaw dropped when Kevel pointed at them and called them dryads, wondering if they were finally waking up. The boy frowned at the weird phrasing, trying to figure out what the heck "wake up" was really telling him. And Kevel laid it all out, this whole forest was their home, and they crashed in their bedroom to rest. He reassured Ryan they weren't trying to hurt him at all, just curious little troublemakers, all mischief and no malice. And the spirits instantly swarmed Ryan amaze, desperate to catch their first glimpse of a human. They bombarded him with questions about whether he could fly, practically begging him to prove it. Kevel chose to play along to dodge trouble, but Ryan had already started walking away. The little spirits snapped at his heels, utterly lost where the heck was the human boy heading, and they kept calling after him, confused. Ryan cut his apologies short and told the tiny spirits they just didn't have time to play. He said his only goal was to keep pushing forward and not stop. And Kevel's sister wheeled on him, demanding to know if he was finally done resting. Our boy made it crystal clear he'd be ready to bolt the second the call came. Kevel stared baffled and asked himself what move they should make next. The dryads' voices suddenly turned cold and sharp, demanding he explain why he refused to play with them. And And just like that, their faces twisted into a threat, cold promises that he'd never make it out. Kevel instantly felt it like something flipped, and their whole vibe crashed into the worst version of itself, and Ryan's voice shook as he nervously asked if the Dryads were truly as harmless as he'd been insisting. Kevel admitted that sure, they're not dangerous, but they're insanely troublesome, and the whole group got slammed with a sudden panic attack because a furious swarm of spirits tore after them, forcing them to flee. Ryan blurted out, "What's your weakness?" like his life depended on it, and the answer screamed, "Use fire," but Kevel's sister instantly blasted that horrendous idea out of the air. A warning like, "If a fire hits here, it'll turn the whole forest into a disaster, no question." Kevel nodded, praying they could settle this peacefully since they had no intention of killing, but Ryan suddenly slammed his feet to the ground, and that frantic escape screeched to a halt, and a fresh idea ignited in his mind, and his thoughts trailed off as it took over. He demanded to know if their only shot was to do every single thing the spirits demanded. And Kevel confirmed the usual game plan. They keep going until everyone's too tired to continue. When Ryan heard the word sleep, a wild idea sparked, if only he knew a lullaby. Kevel totally misread the situation, and before he even caught up, he geared up to act on the boy's idea right away. A decision that blindsided Ryan so hard he didn't see it coming at all. He unleashed a brutal gust of wind that blasted the tiny spirits into the air, but the Dryads were practically begging him to do it again, living their best life. Kevel snapped that the lullaby triggered his response, then his magic tore the air into a ruthless cutting wind spell. Kevel suddenly realized this brutal wind-cutting spell wasn't just a move, it had a real name of its own. Ryan insisted it was nothing but wind magic, just too weak to slice through such light targets. And he snapped in pure frustration. He wanted a lullaby, not some brutal cutting wind spell. But Kevel snapped with sudden curiosity, hounding Ryan to teach him the formula for Kame Taka. Ryan blurted out that right now was absolutely not the moment to start a magic lesson. Kevel started cooking up a wild theory. If lullaby could turn into Kame Taka, then maybe, just maybe, the flip could work the other way too. And Ryan snapped that it wasn't that simple, then he froze mid-sentence as a brilliant idea started sparking and snapping into place inside his mind. Kevel clocked the look on his face at once, because he knew that boy had a plan brewing, and Ryan snapped his eyes up at the forest, sure he'd finally found the thing he was missing. He just needed to figure out how to start it. Swearing they de-unleash lullaby and Kame Taka back-to-back without wasting a second. Kevel finally got it. Those hand signs weren't magic tricks at all. They were just flipped to pull off the exact opposite effect. While the tiny Dryads keep zipping through the air, totally clueless about what they're about to unleash. Ryan leaned in with total confidence and said there's only one way to find out, put it to the test and see if it really works. And Kevel grinned, fully backing the boys as they charged forward with bold, no-nonsense decisions. Side by side, they started chanting the initiating spell Formula 756, and lullaby sent the next note, unleashing a sparkling, drowsy burst of magic right at the spirits, and Ryan bolted up and demanded they reverse the spell immediately, as they ripped open and unleashed spell Formula 663, and right after that, Kametachi tore into action. Kevel's sister stared at their incredible display, completely stunned, like their teamwork was doing magic right in front of her eyes. While Kevel watched the magic finally hit, it all clicked. He understood the whole strategy at last. That second spell's wind didn't fade, it churned right in place, spinning like it wanted to explode, snaring the Dryads in a soft little vortex that lulled them into sleep, one breath at a time. Kevel had to admit those two spells together were straight-up brilliant as a dozing Dryad, she suddenly noticed the lullaby magic wasn't sung. It was scattered as a fine powder, drifting on the wind straight into her world. Ryan settled among the sleeping spirits and it finally hit him. This was what real magic felt like, and Kevel's sister shot over to him, practically breathless with relief that her brother was okay. Kevel erupted in praise, calling the boy's strategy and technique absolutely brilliant. But Ryan swore he couldn't have pulled it off by himself. Kevel had to hold the wind steady. He grinned as he admitted it. Only the two of them could have pulled off that move. Ryan shot up to his feet, grinning as he blurted out that it was finally time to head for convection. And Kevel shot back, "Are you sure you want to admit you're done, after burning all that energy?" But our boy clenched his jaw and insisted on one thing, keep pushing ahead, no matter what. Then he smirked and asked if Kevel would carry him if he ran out of steam, only to burst out, "Just kidding," right after. Kevel didn't hesitate for a second. He told him it was time to go, and then they were finally on their way. But in that exact moment, Ryan's eyes went wide with full-blown, jaw-dropping shock as a shadowy, menacing presence suddenly burst out of absolutely nowhere, like it had been waiting in the dark. A brutal, unseen force suddenly yanked him clean off his feet. Kevel shrieked his name, lunging forward with a desperate hand outstretched. Ryan kicked and reached back with zero control as they dragged him away. Trapped by those insane, power-drunk tendrils, he got yanked straight into the blackness. He grunted through the pain, hauling himself through thorny undergrowth at breakneck speed while watching his friends get swallowed by the distance, right from where he stood. The space between them exploded wider in the blink of an eye, and he finally slammed to a rough stop, crashing to the ground with a brutal thud. He spun around and there it was, a weird, twisted place crawling with tangled roots, like the world had tangled itself in. Wondering if he'd been trapped inside that tree, he pushed forward, determined to track down Kevel and the others. But then boom, a sudden sound snapped him around, and fear jolted him so hard it rattled his nerve. His eyes bulged with sheer, stunned disbelief at what he was seeing. He just stood there completely stunned, like, what am I looking at, after finding something like that in a place like this? A familiar woman popped into view with a bright grin, telling him that was a close call, and she shot him a look right when Ryan finally greeted her after all that time. Ryan went completely still, staring in shock, his mind refusing to catch up with what was happening at. He shot his master Jean a sharp question, why was she here, deep in the underground? His mind sprinted, replaying her effortless entrance over and over in his head. Jean beamed with pure joy, thrilled to see his former student standing in front of him again. The boy froze in total disbelief, and you could practically read his shock right off his. And without thinking, he scrambled to cover his missing arm before she could see it. But those razor-sharp eyes had already clocked every detail, and she stared at Ryan like she was piecing everything together right before. Just before she started teasing him for not growing a single inch. He bragged that he'd grown a whole centimeter, but she shrugged and said it was just a margin of error. Ryan shut that joke down fast because bigger problems were waiting to be handled. Finally, he couldn't stand it anymore. He demanded to his master what on earth she was doing down in that pitch-black underground. Jean's smile died the moment she said the obvious. She wasn't just talking, she was coming to save him. She swung her weapon toward him, signaling time to go back, but Ryan just locked onto what was ahead, staring so hard his face stayed unreadable, dead silent. He burst past her out of nowhere, snatching his master before she could even react. Telling her the moment to leave still wasn't here. With his back to them, he snapped that there was no turning back now. Jean's eyes snapped to the missing arm, and the shock in his stare demanded answers. Why was it gone? He told her he was right on the edge of cracking the way to get his arm back, and she finally admitted her notebook never once said a word about magic that could regenerate flesh. But he just couldn't shake the feeling. It wasn't there yet because he hadn't found it. Still, he snapped his head toward her with total certainty, swearing there had to be a way like that, some method that could work. He finally owned it. His reckless choices were the real reason that injury happened, but he refused to climb back to the surface until his arm was fully healed. Ryan begged his master to blaze ahead without him. He needed a moment before he could follow. He wouldn't shut up about how he'd become a way stronger magician since the last time they met. Jean tried to wrap his head around it, stunned that the monsters were actually helping him, and Ryan broke it down for him, showing him stuff he'd never even imagined existed. He stared at the ground, wrestling for the perfect words to make it make sense, admitting he never once truly understood the brutal war between their two races. His fist tightened with pure conviction as he drove his point home too, saying he finally learned the truth, some monsters aren't evil at all. He even pitched the idea that she and his strange new friend would totally click, but Jean just stood there, her face locked in a totally unreadable mask, and until she cracked a tiny, suppressed laugh. Suddenly, she snapped into an uncontrollable burst of laughter, leaving Ryan absolutely dumbfounded by her totally bizarre reaction. She erupted into laughter so loud and non-stop that her legs gave out and she could barely stay on her feet. And the boy just stood there utterly stunned as her sudden outburst tore the moment apart. At last she finally crumpled into calm, and a long, tired sigh escaped her like relief. He fired his plan back at them, then teamed up with the monsters to claw his arm out of their grasp. A sneaky, confident grin blossomed across her face, and she stared down at him like, "Are you seriously an idiot?" She stared at his plan and almost burst into laughter, calling it so absurd she couldn't even hold it in. And Ryan's eyes shot wide with pure, breathless disbelief. Jean stumbled, and by sheer ridiculousness, he left her dizzy, on one. He'd really dragged himself all this way just to pull off something this reckless. Did he seriously think that made sense? Her eyes narrowed to razor slits, and a cold glare cut straight through, admitting she'd secretly been hoping to finally see just how far he'd grown. But now all she could do was spit out her disappointment. Ryan snapped his gaze away, and a wave of old insecurities crashed over him like a brutal childhood memory snapping back to the surface and burning fresh in his mind. Always getting labeled clumsy and terrified to make a move, even when it mattered. Stuck there getting hit with the same order, just stay out of the way, no questions asked. The voices from his past slammed into his thoughts, each one firing doubts about whether he could ever pull this off. Jean stared down at him from above, barking at him to face reality. He was so wiped out he couldn't even stand up straight. She shot him a cold look and told him flat out that he still hadn't learned his own limits. She grinned at him, then snapped that this nonsense had dragged on way too long. She snapped at him to stop being selfish, and her voice sharpened like a blade. He said it was time now so they could blast back up to the surface. And Ryan's eyes went wide with total, jaw-dropping shock. And then bam, Keval crashes onto the scene, wedges himself between them, and Jean's eyes narrowed like steel as she squared up to the monster. Keval shot her a furious glare, and his voice thundered with raw rage, filling the air, as she demanded to know why a monster was crashing their long-awaited reunion. He stays silent, shoulders tight, like he's one breath away from throwing down. Jean waved him off, flat out saying it didn't matter either way, warning him to stay out of their conversation. But Keval prepared to strike, his claws fully extended right when he was about to move, his sister's voice suddenly rang out to him. She grabbed Ryan and yelled for him to stay back as Keval surged forward to intercept Jean. Jean snapped her weapon into place while Keval's sister yanked Ryan away, and Ryan just stood there, dumbfounded, staring at the scene while whispering his master's name over and over in pure confusion. He kept his distance, watching them closely, but he couldn't catch a single word of their conversation as the boy looked completely crushed by the tense standoff, like he couldn't breathe. But Jean brushed the monster's interference off like it was nothing, as Keval shot a hostile glare at the woman who dared to claim she was Ryan's master. She accused him of plotting to use that boy as the weapon to tear the human world apart. But Keval saw straight through her, like her thoughts were an open book and her real intentions couldn't hide. She grilled his scheme hard, totally misreading what was really going on, but Keval ripped her disguise apart, shouting that it was busted and calling out every mistake she made. And the woman braced herself as the confrontation suddenly spiraled higher while Keval started tearing her entire story apart, piece by piece, like it was never meant to stand. First, he snapped out that humans don't label monsters as magical beasts, and she braced for a brutal counterattack as he kept right on explaining. The spell she used to snatch Ryan's attention, turns out it can't actually control plants. Her face tightened as the truth hit. She'd been totally exposed, and there was no hiding anymore, and Keval geared up to unleash the final proof, no doubt, no escape, saying there wasn't even a trace of anything human in her scent. The imposter's eyes snapped wide open, and the shocker cover got totally exposed. And she finally let out a tired, broken sigh as her act crumbled at last. The creature snapped that his deductions were too loud, or her face contorted into a terrifying grin as she snapped, "Now things are finally getting good." In the blink of an eye, her head was utterly destroyed. He tore himself away, leaving Keval frozen over the twitching, headless body. He froze dead still, eyes locked forward, never blinking, like he was daring the world to move. From the shadows, brand new plant monsters sprouted out, demanding their boss give them permission to feast on Keval. Their leader snapped with rage, demanding they call her princess or face her wrath. With a chilling glare, she snapped the command, strangle the prey, then devour them. Keval's sister let out a heavy sigh, grumbling that the world just wouldn't stop interrupting them when they were already running out of time. Keval whipped around to face his sister, Eve, and demanded an update on Ryan's condition. Eve checked that the treatment was complete, but told him his senses wouldn't bounce back right away. Keval goes dead silent, mind racing as this brand new threat hits him in real time. The plant monsters instantly smelled the perfect opening to strike, but Keval shoved them forward as living practice targets, letting his forearm magic rip. The princess's eyes widened when he suddenly blurted out that confident declaration. Eve remembered Ryan's warning about this magic, but she was certain he'd never catch it. Keval pushed Keval to finish fast the moment 2 extra arms burst out of him. The plant monsters snatched up his challenge at once, brimming with hunger for a fight. Kevel leaned in and started spilling the theory behind his insane, one-of-a-kind power state. They claim human magic bends nature's raw power right through their fingers. He figured it out fast. More arms meant his magic power would skyrocket exponentially. And as human magic keeps shifting, the truth stays locked in. Everything that's already there works on a completely different level. He flat out claimed that the physical limits that bind other humans don't touch him at all. With his forearm magic, he can conjure something out of pure nothingness. He leaned in and warned his brand new opponents to keep their eyes locked on him, because the moment he cast that spell, everything was about to change. Branded this jaw-dropping force as magic that forges souls. And those plant monsters were totally blindsided when the attack hit out of nowhere. With a snap out of nowhere, he summons eerie, cat-like creatures that charge in and fight for him. And the plant monsters could only gape in total disbelief at those wild, bizarre summons. Eve stared as his spell tore open the earth, and tiny dark creatures burst up like they were born from the ground itself. One of his cat-like summons strutted up to the plant monsters and demanded, "Was my form magnificent as?" As Kevel confessed, this was his very first time summoning multiple creatures all at once. The plant princess erupted in a furious roar, warning him not to mess with her as her minions sliced through Kevel's pitiful cat-like creations with effortless ease. Kevel leaned in, staying cool as he asked her, "So you didn't like my first spell attempt, huh?" He clenched his forearms, ready to unleash an even deadlier attack. In the blink of an eye, the whole area erupted under jagged shards of ice. And the princess scoffed, challenging him, like, did he honestly think he could freeze them? But Kevel cut her off, shaking his head and telling her the truth. This wasn't what really happened. Revealing that her henchmen have turned into living ice, straight up, crystal clear ice. He told her his magic didn't just stop them, it shattered their matter and swapped what they were made of. Meaning even if the ice melts, not a single trace of them will be left behind. He purred that her praise was proof his creation magic was truly wondrous. And the princess's eyes snapped wide, flooding with pure terror and hot, seething rage. She gasped as she looked down and saw her legs pinned tight in his ice. Kevel swallowed his pride and apologized, admitting he still couldn't control it perfectly as. The furious princess could only stare at him, utterly stunned, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She grilled him, demanding to know what he was aiming for, then snapped, "Why are you slaughtering monsters for a human?" Kevel leaned in and told her she'd get her answer, right after he fired off his own question. She shot a direct message to the Thorn Princess. He leaned in and demanded to know when the war between monsters and humans would finally end, and when the last human was gone, she fired back instantly, no hesitation at all. She declared it like a vow, this is the most heartfelt wish every monster on Earth dares to dream. Until they finally reach the ultimate prize their ruthless leader, Lord Rajua, has been driving them toward. Kevel just shrugged and told her, "I see," acting so calm as the princess grilled him with questions. Kevel pressed her, demanding to know if she truly believes monsters and humans can ever make peace, then stopped, waiting for her answer. The furious princess snapped and roared at him to stop playing around. She swore to her core that Lord Rajua would never stand for her, screaming, "All humans must perish," but Kevel calmly cut her off and told her straight up that he knew she was a fan of Rajua. And he spun around and strode off, leaving the defeated princess behind with nothing but silence. He told her she'd only laugh again if he finally spilled his real goal, but the princess's eyes snapped wide as he got ready to lay his intentions bare. He swore he'd shield Ryan from every danger out there, especially from threats like her. Standing there like an unbreakable wall, he's finally made his purpose crystal clear, so now. But then the princess leaned in and confessed she needs Ryan's power to pull off her own deadly plan. She froze in stunned silence, utterly wrecked by the way his logic made zero sense, like her brain just couldn't keep up As Kevel said it straight to her, he had nothing left to say. The talk finally ended and she stood there frozen, defeated in that icy cavern, and he strode off without even a second look, leaving her frozen in place, trapped in the ice. Eve softly called his name and whispered, "Brother," demanding to know if he was still refusing to tell Ryan about their plan. Kevel stomped forward and shot her down with a clear, fearless no. "He told me the future was still way too shaky to spill every secret. I'll just wait for the moment to feel right, then I'll tell Ryan the truth, like it'll happen on its own." One of his tiny summons threw a quick request into the air, asking everyone to team up while everything was waiting. And Eve swore total loyalty, ready to do anything she could for her brother. Keval glanced back, then gave a simple, heartfelt thank you like it mattered more than anything. Right then Ryan finally stirred awake and grabbed their attention. The moment his senses crawled back, the boy snapped to it. He knew Keval's voice instantly. As the blur finally faded, Eve slipped in close, gently but firmly pressed him back, and told him to stay right where he was. Ryan's eyes snapped open, and his mind started stitching together the wreckage of everything that had just happened. And he gaped at the wrecked plant monster lying defeated in front of him. He shut his eyes and whispered his master's name, and it hit him with dawning certainty as Keval kicked off his explanation of the monsters hiding underground. Ryan stared, completely lost, as Keval fired off details about monsters and the exact places they live, using the thorn people as the wild example of a species that weaponizes poison. Keval said their poison crawls in, so they've got a second trick up their sleeve. One where they rake their victims with razor-sharp, thorn-like claws, cutting deep the moment they strike. They slip into those wounds, read the memories, then shape themselves into someone the other person loves, right across. A brutal trap meant to scramble their minds as the poison finally sinks in, and Ryan's eyes snapped wide the moment it all clicked. He finally saw the imposter's whole game plan. Keval can't help but smirk at the irony. He runs into a creature like that so damn soon, and then he stared straight at Ryan, and suddenly his point snapped into place like it had been waiting there all along, telling him the truth that the person he'd just seen earlier was nothing but a fake. He leaned in and told the boy to stop panicking. Everything was under control now. But Ryan shot back, "Wait, what am I even supposed to worry about in the first place?" He insisted he'd known it was a fraud from the start, no explanation needed. Keval just nodded and took his answer like, "Nice, that's music to my ears." Tears suddenly poured down Ryan's face, ripping the mask off his real failings. He couldn't lie to himself. There was no way his real master would have buried himself that deep underground. He snapped his eyes from his memory of his master to his friend Keval, correcting himself mid-sentence. Ryan plastered on a grin, told everyone he was fine, and pushed himself to move on. They huddled over the defeated monster, and the lie finally got ripped wide open. And Ryan replayed the vicious words the imposter spit at him, over and over. He could tell his real master would never, ever act like someone like that. Ryan stood there, dead serious, and swore he was nothing like the person he used to be anymore. Swearing he'd declaw his arm back and smash Rajua, he chased the one thing he truly wanted, finally earning everyone's recognition. An unexpected sound jolted him out of his thoughts in an instant, and he reminded himself Keval was right beside him now, so he wasn't alone. He remembered how his new friend had been steering him every step of the way, showing him slick shortcuts to power up, and Keval's voice thundered inside his skull, snapping him to the here and now and shutting out every past failure. The monster kept talking, spitting pressure into his chest, demanding he stay on the move and push forward, and Ryan was convinced that with Keval on his side, nothing in the world could stop what they could pull off together. Then a voice snapped from behind him, and he jolted hard, shocked out of his step just as a fresh crew of cat-like monsters prowled up and demanded if he'd ever met their boss, Keval. Keval snapped. This red-haired magician and the imposter cop weren't just random strangers. They were one of those newcomers, and their leader lined in and told everyone the magician was one of the humans who stormed into her territory. She spilled that their battles happened in Keval, and the odds were so wild it felt like the universe was setting them up. Ryan leaned in and grilled the newcomer. Was his master really that ridiculously strong? But she confessed she'd never even seen Jean battle. She only knew he was shockingly beautiful. Ryan just stared back, stone-faced, like nothing in the world could move him. But the cat monster was totally swept up in her own memories, staring in awe at the magician, and Keval remembered her gushing over those magnificent magical skills, praising every smooth, deadly technique like it was pure artistry. Ryan finally realized Jean was the spark that had Keval going wild for magic, and the cat monster revealed that meeting Ryan finally fulfilled her wish. She got to connect with Jean. Keval snapped that it makes total sense for her to take Ryan as her disciple, because his skills are straight-up unbelievable. But Ryan snapped his gaze aside, stunned and clueless on how to answer that totally unexpected praise. His thoughts snapped back to the imposter's cruel words, ripping into him, calling him an idiot, and until her last crushing declaration lands like a punch, utter disappointment. He shook his head hard, trying to scrape that brutal memory out of his mind. And there he stood, staring at a drooping rose, forcing himself to admit he should have seen it was all a lie. A cat-like summon yanked their attention and warned, "Don't drift too far from each other when The caverns suddenly erupted into violent tremors, yanking them off balance, and Ryan crumpled to the ground, staring at the shaking world like, is this an earthquake? His eyes bulged with shock as the ceiling above them cracked and crumbled. Eve watched in pure horror as the collapse kept escalating. A massive boulder slammed from above, smashing the group in half and sending everyone scattering as it tore the flow apart, and Eve screamed Ryan's name as he got swallowed by the dust and wreckage. As the shaking finally faded, I grabbed him and demanded to know if he was okay. Ryan spun around, stunned and lost, shouting for Keval, and Keval shot back that he and Eve were totally safe, on the other side of that brutal rockfall. But right now, a massive boulder shoved them apart, cracking it felt downright impossible. Ryan admitted his own magic just wasn't strong enough to break through and clear the path, but Eve stepped forward with pure determination blazing in her eyes. Enough of everyone else's rules, now it was time for her to unleash her own magic. She told me that staying close to Keval has sparked her imagination, helping her picture his brutal, power-packed spells like they're right in front of her. Deciding this was the perfect moment to test brand new destructive formulas. Ryan's mind flashed with visions of his own death, and that terror jolted him into action. He had to stop her plan, and fast. And he blurted to her, "Go on ahead without me," then pointed quickly like it couldn't wait. He motioned to a different route and told them to link up later. He told me this was the safer, more direct path, fewer monsters waiting in the dark at. They said their destination was right up ahead on that very road. Eve practically buzzed with joy when she heard the news, and her excitement was impossible to miss. And Ryan promised he'd be right there, waiting for them, because he knew they were itching to get moving. But Eve leaned in and insisted, "Stop, this isn't the real problem," trying to get him to finally listen. Ryan leaned over the ledge, alone now, eyes wide, and the terrifying truth of his solo journey finally started to crush down on him. He kept telling himself this was Keval's scheme, and that his friend would trust him no matter what. Fighting through exhaustion with raw, unbreakable determination. But his legs buckled out of nowhere, the old poison still burning through his veins. And he shoved his fear aside and pushed forward, because Keval demanded he kept moving. But just when he tried to wrestle his nerves under control, a cruel voice slammed into his thoughts. The imposters hit him with the reminder that nobody out there is expecting him to do a damn thing. His eyes went huge as that voice kept battering his mind like it wouldn't stop, pressing him to tell the truth about what he really thought of Keval's latest attitude. A fresh vision flashed inside the Anubis-like monster, and it snapped at Keval's moves like, "What you're doing is strange," telling Ryan that if he can't see it, then he's been played, flat-out tricked. A creepy, floating grin taunted him, sneering that humans teaming up with monsters was nothing but a joke. Ryan clenched his teeth hard, desperately fighting to drown out that creepy voice. Then a giant, shadowy owl monster slammed down over him in the dark, and our boy realized he'd just stumbled straight into another monster's trap. One of Keval's little summons freaked out the instant the new threat showed up. Then the cavern erupted with a sudden, brutal scuffle, chaos everywhere, non-stop noise crashing through the air. A razor-sharp claw slashed through the air, missing its target by a hair as the leap carried him out of danger. Ryan just stood there, stunned, trying to piece together what the heck had happened amid all that chaos. He snapped his head up and there it was, a harpy, a freaky bird monster with a human face, staring right back. And he instantly sized up its lean frame, knowing it could still tear him apart. Since it wasn't striking him, he tiptoed by, trying to slip past without making a sound, but the harpy was spiraling in panic, not knowing what to do with the human intruder. Ryan listened while the creature droned on about how clumsy and weak it felt, like it couldn't stand itself. And the harpy kept wailing, fully convinced that a creature like it was totally pointless. Ryan suddenly snapped, screaming at the creature to get it together, telling that stunned monster to shut out every voice that ever dared to look down on it. And the harpies you summoned surged forward, roaring like they'd been charged by his sudden, unexpected encouragement. Ryan said self-pity doesn't just hurt, it doubles down on the lie that you'll never succeed, pushing the creature to try believing in something bright for once. With fresh, rock-solid belief, he declared, "I can do anything." And the harpy just gawked at him, stunned into total silence by his outburst. Then it slammed into Ryan, pure embarrassment, as soon as he realized what he'd just blurted out. And he got so flustered trying to shoo away his own motivational speech. A tiny trapped chuckle burst out of the harpy, and the creature finally exhaled, chuckled with relief, and thanked him from the bottom of its heart for his kindness. It became crystal clear, it wasn't mocking him for how lost he looked, like his confusion was never the punchline. Because the shock of his unexpected words didn't just land, it fully brought him relief. The harpy finally caved and admitted she was weak, and then she said the first human she'd ever met, Ryan, couldn't be more different from the scary tales Lord Raju spun, smiling like it finally understood that maybe humans really aren't all bad after all. Ryan snapped his gaze back, his determination forged even harder by the exchange, and the creature locked onto his intent like it could read the vow he never even said out loud. Ryan flashed a confident grin like, yep, we're totally on the same page. But just as it hit, his thoughts snapped back, mission mode kicked in, and he couldn't stop himself from asking why it was here. And that sudden question blindsided the harpy so hard she didn't even see it coming. Right then, two more monsters drifted into view and casually dropped that the recent earthquake had just hit. And the heartbeat in their chests sounded wildly nervous the instant they showed up out of nowhere. Ryan knew he had to reach the end of the path, but he was stuck. He didn't know what to do next, not for a second. Stuck on how he could talk these fresh monsters into letting a human slip through. Ryan thought about casting a spell to get out, then the harpy blurted out that it could help as asking him if he wanted her to be his guide through that deadly cavern path. Before he could even open his mouth, the creature snatched him up, already hungry to help. While the other monsters stared in shock, whispering questions about the harpy's wild, baffling moves. They burst into a dark passage. After the quake, the light stones were shattered, and the way forward went pitch black. As the harpy feared what lurked in the dark, Ryan tightened his focus and got ready to unleash a spell. He clenched his fist, pouring every ounce of power into a simple magic formula. Then, with just one word, he snapped reality into motion and glowing orbs burst to life, lighting up every step of their way. The harpy's eyes went wide, blown away by his simple, yet shockingly effective, display of magic, wondering if every human had powers like this waiting inside them as they kept moving forward. The creature couldn't stop staring, praising Ryan's jaw-dropping magical talent like it had just witnessed a miracle. But the moment it spotted those berries, the whole vibe crashed, and it felt utterly worthless beside them. The harpy confessed it was nothing but a weak coward, too scared to even fly up and grab the fruit. It gets ripped apart day after day, scolded, mocked, and judged for every single failure. The creature stared at its brand new human friend, wishing it could somehow be just as cool and legendary, but Ryan's patience snapped. He leaned in and barked at the harpy to listen up. He admitted he isn't always this capable, and that his weaknesses are still stacked high. Then the harpy leaned in and demanded to know what he does when he can't pull it off by himself. Ryan flashed two fingers in the air, but the monster had no clue what the gesture even meant. And he shouted that when you can't pull it off solo, you grab hands and do it together. He offered to help the harpy gather berries, all to repay its guidance and the creature's face lit up with pure joy as it gratefully snapped up his kind offer. But Ryan had to admit it, he couldn't just zip up there, not with that one-arm limitation holding him back. Thinking it through, he realized one good throw, one rock would smash that fruit to pieces. Then it hit him. He demanded to know if the harpy could slash those branches with its own feathers. The harpy thrashed its wings with everything it had, whipping up for a single feather launch. But the attempt crashed hard, and the creature crumpled to the ground, beaten and broken. Ryan leaned in and studied one of those massive feathers, its tip gleaming like it could slice the air, and just like that, a wild idea sparked to life inside his head. The dejected harpy snapped that it couldn't be done as Ryan walked right past it, and then he started scribbling a wild formula in the dirt, and the harpy couldn't look away. With its massive size and feather-like feel, that feather could be the perfect piece for his plan. That confused creature snapped, "What were you thinking when you flapped your wing earlier?" And Ryan clutched the feather, pressing hard as if he could make the outcome feel real in his mind. He remembered his master's words, just wishing for something isn't going to cut it. Saying that in your own head you can fly as much as you want, anytime you want. And the harpy kept repeating them word by word until the meaning finally sank in. Ryan snapped into action and blasted his magic spell, Formula 6, Levitation. He launched the enchanted feather screaming through the air at insane speed, smashing into the world with raw force. It hacked clean through the thick branch, splitting right through the berry-holding grip. The harpy could only stare, utterly stunned and wide-eyed, as the severed branch crashed down, its weight slammed straight into its waiting claws. It stared up in pure joy, stunned they actually managed to get the berries. And the creature bowed him over and over, praising him as a genius for the massive achievement they just pulled off. But Ryan quickly looked away and swore he wasn't any kind of genius. He told me how he learned teamwork and how to launch those feather projectiles by watching others. He handed the credit to the harpy, because that spell only worked thanks to her one-of-a-kind feathers. The creature tells it the berries never could have been gathered without its help. The harpy's eyes suddenly burned with happy tears, because she finally realized it was her team's victory. And for the very first time, the creature lit up with real confidence and pure pride. Ryan said they could stuff way more berries by sliding them onto the harpy's feathers. Then it hit him out of nowhere, his eyes blew wide with sudden realization as. Then he spotted two of Kevil's tiny summons lurking in a hidden crevice, staring right at them from cover where. One of the creatures spotted the fruit and instantly knew it was Kevil's. The harpy spun around and thanked Ryan, telling him his guidance helped her get the berries. Still, praise hit like a spark. Flustered, it clutched one of the fruits like it might vanish. Ryan flashed a gentle smile and warned the creature, "Mess this up and it could get dangerous if any other monsters spot us." And the harpy's gaze burned with a sharp, fearless understanding of the massive danger they were about to gamble with. He ordered the creature to vanish from everyone's eyes as they geared up to split. And there in the silence, the harp waited as Ryan turned and left the cavern behind him. A voice suddenly shouted "Ku" from right behind. It made Ryan snap his head around, totally baffled by that sudden, unfamiliar noise. With a sharp jolt, the harpy finally understood those words were meant for it. Cuckoo blushed and shyly asked the boy for his name, offering her own in exchange. Ryan froze for a heartbeat, then lined in, letting their simple, honest question hit him like a truth he couldn't ignore. Cuckoo looked at the question like it was totally wild to bring up right now, especially since they were about to leave. Ryan nodded, admitting it spelled his name crystal clear. Then he turned to leave again, but then he spun back, flashed her a warm smile, and swore to Cuckoo that this wasn't the end for them. Cuckoo froze in total shock at what he said, tears burning up in his eyes, and it flapped its wings with wild joy, practically buzzing with excitement as it eagerly agreed to meet Ryan again someday. Ryan pressed on through the cavern, still buzzing from their quick encounter, and he stared forward with fresh purpose burning in his chest, calm but unshakable in every step. Finally, he burst through the last stretch of the path, and there was Kevil, waiting for him like she'd been holding her breath. Ryan cracked a joke about the delay, but the whole time he couldn't shake the feeling Kevil was hiding his real plan. Kevil's summon promised that even though it would take time, it never once doubted Ryan would make it out alive. Eve jabbed at the feathers Ryan was clutching and demanded to know if they were from the Wind tribe. Ryan grinned, swearing he dodged a fight and scored a souvenir from a kind monster, but for just a split second his expression cracked, doubt flickered across his face. Kevil instantly clocked that weird pause, the kind that screamed, "Why did you hesitate so fast?" And Ryan couldn't shake the feeling, maybe he was just spiraling, overthinking the whole mess. He snapped his head side to side, frustrated to the bone, trying to shove those messy thoughts out of his head. Kevil leaned in and demanded to know if Ryan was hiding the truth about the war between their kinds. And Ryan flat out admitted he just wished they could have all met without anyone ever having to fight. Eve stared off into the distance, wishing they could have just sat down and talked about magic calmly, like everything didn't have to explode. She cut herself off and brushed it aside like it was nothing more than a fleeting thought. Those berries from Cuckoo lay scattered on the dirt near the symbol left behind from his last wild encounter. And Kevil snapped at Ryan that he was overthinking everything, and all he needed was to quiet that stormy mind, because that's. Which made one of the tiny summons nod and agree, then tell Kevil he was running the exact same plan. Kevil then leaned in and asked if that's why Ryan looked so crushed earlier, but Ryan spun around, insisting that their chaotic meetup had actually proven something huge. Since they were suddenly getting along like best friends, it meant their compatibility had to be flawless. He shot them a confident grin and asked, like it was a done deal, was he wrong about that? All he got back from that towering monster was a quiet chuckle, nothing else, just the sound. Who leaned down to the boy, smiling as he spoke his name, soft, amused, and full of mischief. Then he snapped that Ryan was unlike anyone, an incredibly strange human, a truly, a weird human who somehow flipped his whole outlook on life, like his mind got rebooted overnight. A smaller monster snapped at Kevil for not just telling Ryan he was a good guy straight up while Eve watched them laugh and play together, pure joy lit up her face. But right when they finally caught a breath, the cavern snapped back to chaos, shaking violently again, and Ryan suddenly felt it. Another earthquake was slamming in, warning everyone to stay sharp and cautious. Kevil snapped that their destination was right up ahead now, and Ryan clenched his jaw and braced himself, ready to take on whatever hit next. Then the story whips into a flashback. Jean leans in, grins, and asks her companion, "You ready?" And this young guy, Chris, just flashes pure confidence, like he's ready for literally anything. Jean flashes a grin and tells him to ditch the idle talk. Let's get a sweat going before our evening drinks. They huddle side by side in front of a weird triangular doorway, carved straight into the rock like it's waiting for them. Where Chris slashes a magical marker across the ground, right beside a tiny puddle. And the moment the spell hits, it snaps to life, spraying water everywhere in a wild burst. He caught the young adventurer totally off guard, thanks to his own blunder. Jean burst into laughter at his own misfortune, mocking his clumsiness as he complained, and she kept rubbing it in, laughing that his little mishap had totally made her day, right in his face, to his boiling annoyance. He muttered that he wasn't really feeling this mission at all. As she started walking, he leaned in and reminded her they were finally here, after 3 long years, to see Ryan. Chris leaned in and admitted he felt uneasy, then pointed out the terrifying truth: they'd just walked into a 4-person dungeon alone. Jean asked if he was questioning her skills, and he immediately shot back that it wasn't true. Then he fired back, reminding her she once admitted she had 0 chance right here. He leaned in and asked what she'd do if they actually bumped into a real mummy. As the episode flips to the paperwork, it all screams the same thing. The monster's traits match that mummy from 3 years back. The photo flashes a way younger Ryan. He's taking on that creature solo, and then he vanishes for a whole week. Chris narrowed his eyes, grim determination locking in as he stared down the file. As he talked to Jean, he made it crystal clear: finding the mummy was way more likely than finding Ryan. But Jean flashed a smile and swore she'd track down her adorable apprentice, no matter what it cost. And she shut her eyes tight, fully certain their mission would succeed beyond doubt. She prodded his blushing pride, bragging with sharp confidence that not even a mummy stood a chance against them. But he panicked as he pushed her away, scrambling to change the subject before she could see through him. Chris leaned in and asked Jean straight up if she honestly believed Ryan could have survived this long, despite it all, insisting a rookie couldn't possibly get this deep into the dungeon. He slammed Ryan's last-minute plan to throw a party as totally reckless and utterly. Jean smirked at him and muttered that landing even a single body would be nothing short of a miracle. Then she straight up confessed that when it came to Ryan, she absolutely wasn't a fan of his, and Chris didn't even hesitate. He snapped that he could barely stand the kid. Both of them started ripping into him, screaming that he was stubborn, arrogant, and nothing but a coward, and Jean teased Chris and it hit him hard. Chris really couldn't stand Ryan. He brushed her aside, snapped that she focus on the mission and stay sharp, then his smile vanished, and the moment he sensed trouble in the air, the seriousness hit his face. He lined in and warned them they'd gone way too far from the safety of the transfer markers. And Jean caught the silence turning cold in his gut, realizing there weren't any monsters around at all. She slammed on the brakes out of nowhere, and Chris froze in pure shock. And he snapped, demanding to know what she was doing, totally thrown off by that sudden stop. She just smiled and told him straight up, there are only 2 reasons for this kind of quiet. Either every monster in this area has already been wiped out, or something so brutal happened that they had no choice but to tear themselves away from their posts. Meanwhile, a pack of monsters huddles around the fire, staring at the unburnt wood like it's a threat. A clawed hand dives straight into the roaring flames and yanks out a burning log without even a flinch. A little creature drops to its knees and begs Rajua for power. A violent surge of power blasts out of the ground right before them, like the earth just exploded right before it happens. A desperate plea to the power that governs life itself, begging it to step in and save them. A colossal draconic nightmare claws its way out of the whirling, chaotic energy, and this thing hurls curses, snapping out of nowhere, admitting it only let its guard down for one brief moment. The tiny monsters cheer as Lord Goldie returns, then he points the new target straight at Kevel and the human brat. Lord Goldie roared with pure rage, demanding to know where his targets had vanished. Then right out of nowhere, a voice snapped in, demanding to know about the human brat he just name-dropped. A gloved hand shot up a photograph of Ryan right in front of him, so he couldn't miss it. Jean smirked the second she and Chris stepped in, then asked, "So, is he the boy you've been searching for?" Goldie bared his teeth and snarled at them, promising to blast them to ashes for their insolence, but she didn't even flinch. She was buzzing, thrilled to have landed a real lead this fast. No. He knew that he'd never cooperate, so he ditched the slow route and pushed a far faster way to crack the truth, which had Chris reeling, shocked by her aggressive, straight-to-the-point attack. He cut right in front of her and slammed down the promise that he'd take care of the fight, because Ryan was waiting up ahead. Chris snapped at Jean, telling her not to waste a single second on a threat that small. Goldie's rage exploded. Chris's insanely cocky attitude pushed her over the edge. And in the blink of an eye, Chris rocketed across the gap between them, landing so fast it felt like time itself froze as that colossal monster roared. It swore it would turn him into charcoal. But the creature's confidence snapped the moment the boy hit it with unbelievable speed. And Chris dug in and declared he was just as furious as the monster, staring it down without backing off. He introduced himself as Christopher Alt, then snapped at the beast not to mistake him for some run-of-the-mill kid. Meanwhile, in the Toposhi settlement, an unthinkable new plan was already unfolding, and it was anything but normal. Their prize was a dark, ominous cave just past the village line, where little creatures were panicking, thinking if the villagers ever spotted Ryan, everything would spiral into chaos fast. But Kevil just smirked, claiming that getting through would be a walk in the park for them now, and he spun to his companion, shooting for a quick yes, right, Ryan. Ryan stood there with a flower and berry crown on his head, looking completely unimpressed. Kevil stood in one of his summons and bragged that his disguise was now flawless, down to the last detail, and then, but Ryan just shot them a cold glare, totally unmoved by their ridiculous attempt. Kevil grinned and said that once his invisibility kicks in, not a single soul would ever spot him. Even though he signed off on the plan, he still snapped out a warning. Ryan's human scent had a serious flaw. A summon leaned in and said, "We're drowning your stench in plants, so quit whining and shut up." Then Ryan leaned in and demanded, "Kevil, do you remember the spell pattern I just taught you?" And Kevil said that when he shifted the finger positions, he could flip lightning into pure invisibility. Then Ryan snapped. He remembered one vital detail he'd somehow totally left out as. Kevil shot the question, "Can he cast his lightning spell on living things?" And Ryan immediately screamed, "No." The summoner couldn't believe it was really that dangerous. Then Ryan cut right in and confirmed it instantly, warning Kevil that his power control was a disaster, so that spell was a ticking, terrifying gamble. Kevil said he understood the warning, but the truth was clear. He had no idea how deadly it really was. The other summons snapped their focus back on track, drilling into Kevil that their mission right now was to stay invisible. Kevil snapped into the hand signs, charging up a ruthless, hard-to-control spell as Ryan stood there perfectly still. He rocked that ridiculous floral disguise like it was the funniest thing ever. The spell snapped to life and Ryan started to fade while the summon stared in stunned awe, until he vanished for good, leaving those tiny creatures shaking with pure amazement at the magic. Eve flashed proof the spell worked, because now she could only hear his voice. Kevil told the now invisible Ryan, "Hop on my shoulder, we're hitting the road." And with Ryan on board, Eve pushed them to race, gripping the moment because she had no clue how long that magic would last. Ryan sat there like a bomb about to go off, fully convinced he couldn't just relax and enjoy the view yet. But he clenched his resolve, squared his shoulders, and announced they were finally ready to move out. Right when they were about to head out, a sharp cracking sound suddenly snapped through the air and startled them. They both whipped around, desperate to catch what could have unleashed that unexpected noise. They pushed through the monster settlement and Eve clocked it fast. She had to track down better food for Ryan. As they pushed through the village streets, little creatures, quiet and harmless looking, closed in all around them. From his sneaky spot where he couldn't be seen, Ryan admitted the settlement was way less terrifying than he'd ever pictured. His eyes swept the surroundings, and he took in the shockingly calm, totally normal scene like it didn't make sense. Watching tiny creatures calmly sort their food and plow through their daily chores while another monster hauled a cart like it was just another mindless part of their everyday routine. One of those creatures even hung up laundry, so surprisingly domestic and human-like it felt unreal. And a rabbit-like mother softly cradled her sleeping child in her arms, holding them close like nothing in the world could wake them. Ryan suddenly realized they weren't chasing anything real at all. They were just burning through life, desperately trying to catch someone's attention. When that tiny horned creature suddenly clocked the towering Kevil closing in on them, panic hit instantly. This tiny monster called out to him, speaking politely and honoring him as the gravekeeper, and Kevil casually asked if they needed anything, while Ryan's gut churned, worried they'd already been spotted. Two Anubis-like guards burst into view and demanded to know if those recent quakes meant something bad was crawling down from above. Ryan couldn't shake the thought that a cuckoo might be nearby, but Kevil brushed it off and he tore through the village with his eyes, hunting for a harpy, only to find nobody matching that look. Then wham, a winged creature tore out of the sky and rocketed down so fast it stole the breath right out of the moment, and Ryan froze in stunned silence, realizing too late that it wasn't just a monster, it was a harpy. The Anubis guard instantly snapped into a tense, watchful stance, tracking every move the newcomers made. As that harpy swooped in and landed with a smug, arrogant smirk, it was obvious she wasn't a friendly cuckoo at all. Kevil's voice sliced through the tension, barking at the invisible Ryan to back off, get hidden, and stay out of sight. And even the little creatures stumbled over that order, but Kevil clocked the real threat in an instant. The harpy's razor talons bit into the earth as it barked a chilling command, everything around them bursting into flames. It promised this would trap their target so tight there'd be zero chance to slip away. And one of its tiny winged summons slammed its staff down and unleashed a brutal blast of fire that tore through everything. They made sure Kevil wasn't the only one, there had to be a human nearby, too. The harpy whipped around to Kevil with a smug grin, then pressed, "So that's right, yeah." The Anubis guard stepped in, barked Fruge, and demanded to know the harpy's plan, then. But Fruge snapped the question right back, accusing Kevil of letting a human through after Goldie's failure. It glared at him, declaring that every move he made was putting all the monsters' lives in danger, and then the Anubis guard snapped that their orders were clear: crush this rebellion and wipe out the human. Kevil scoffed hard, ripping into their twisted plan for order and peace. The Anubis guard snapped back in fury, roaring that he was the very last person anyone should question. A cat-like summon snapped at him, calling out how he played the hero after wrecking their homes, and then it all spiraled from there. From the back Fruge, a cold, sinister laugh slipped out, quiet, but it chilled every word they said. The harpies smirked and tangled their words, trying to twist the blame onto everyone else, like they were the ones who were right. Its expression screamed pure, unfiltered contempt for them all. And he shot down their whole argument like it was pure, laugh-out-loud nonsense. It claimed that beings like Kevil, whose existence was a mistake, had absolutely no right to judge, and Ryan sat there in stunned silence while Fruge blasted everything about Kevil as wrong and demanded it be fixed right away. They screamed that in Lord Raju's world, there's simply no room for humans or monsters like him. With that, Davin gets hit by frenzied winged summons, set up for a coordinated, brutal assault, but the Anubis guard snapped up a shadowy arm and slammed the whole incoming assault to a stop. The attacks kept coming with zero mercy, trapping them with nowhere to go and not a single chance to break free. Then the harpy minions cackled that nowhere was safe and no one would escape their assault. The Anubis guard jeered down from the ground, taunting them like, "Does it feel frustrating to get slammed from up high like that? There's no way they could even dream of reaching the target." Fruge hovered over them like a dare, daring everyone to see just how long they could keep standing. Kevil just stood there for a heartbeat, watching the chaos explode around him before he finally moved. Before he ordered the harpies to freeze in place, warning them not to inch a single step closer. Then he unleashed a relentless storm of feathers, each one landing dead center on the flying creatures. Then one of the little summons slammed into the ground, screaming in agony. The Anubis guard looked crushed that the range was too tight for real practice, and then it hit him. This was the perfect opening to unleash magic, and Ryan couldn't stop it. The summoner's stomach dropped. He panicked, convinced he was seconds away from trying that lightning spell that almost killed him before. An Anubis guard snapped his head up as razor-sharp projectiles came crashing down from the sky, and Fruge mocked him to his face for daring to copy human techniques. He swore he'd move so fast that Kevil wouldn't even get a single chance to strike, leaving them both standing. He bragged that his Gale clan was the fastest there was, no one could even come close. One of his minions baited their target, laughing that all they could ever do was run. But a perfectly aimed projectile slammed into it midair and knocked it clean out of the sky. Fruge stood there stunned by the attack, his mind screaming, where did those berries even come from? And he snapped his gaze downward and saw the Anubis guard below, shouting straight to him. Ryan's voice snapped at Kevil, warning him that spamming magic wasn't happening right now. Fruge jolted to a realization, there really was a human nearby after all. Ryan ordered Kevil to play smarter, and he tore through the area in a frantic search for where that voice was coming from. And the invisible boy leaned in and demanded to know if his distraction finally carved out enough time for them. With a fierce, determined gaze, it was clear the whole plan was already rolling. Kevil burst in from behind Fruge, confirming they had more than enough time. Leaving the harpy stunned, Kevil said his companion was already waiting. Then the gravekeeper snapped that their tiny game was officially done. Fruge crumpled to the ground, his wings shattered and completely useless. The Anubis guard barked to his summon to move, then demanded where Ryan was right now, but Fruge wasn't done cursing Kevil, calling him an abomination that spits in the face of the flame. He hurled his final, desperate assault into the air, screaming that he'd never accept him. No, not ever, even if it killed him. He blindsided Kevil's companions out of nowhere with a lightning-fast move. The harpy drove its blade straight into Kevil's shadowy body, screaming, "Never, not this time, one last time," as a dark claw slammed straight through Fruge's chest, delivering a fatal blow. With his final breath, he gasped out Kevil's name, trembling in pure, shocked disbelief. One lone berry rocketed through the air, sitting there like a silent witness as the brutality crushed everything. And the harpy's final strike tore through everything, leaving only dust swirling in its wake. Ryan burst back in, yanking at Kevil's clothes to rip their attention away. As Fruge's tiny winged summons crumpled to the ground, terror froze them there, pleading with the towering gravekeeper to stop right there, because he was closing in on them. Kevil froze for a heartbeat, staring down at the wrecked, terrified creatures below, but Ryan's grip snapped tighter, yanking him away from the whole scene, urging his companion to let them go and press on, not looking back. He insisted there was no need to hurt them anymore, because they wouldn't chase after him. Kevil whipped around, stunned that a human would beg so mercifully, but Ryan planted his feet and swore he meant every single word. Later, Eve finally confessed that she'd never managed to find the right moment to bring it up. They snapped into action, hurrying to Ryan to tell him. Finally, they'd reached their destination. Kevil stood right there, arms everywhere, grinning like he was about to welcome him into conviction. He posed the big question: if Ryan can't use magic, how the hell is he going to regenerate his body? This monster convention is the start of every nightmare, and the place where wishes finally get their ending. And those tiny summons came through, proving, no doubt at all, that what Kevil said was 100% true. Ryan suddenly felt a restless jolt, like this place was nothing like any world he'd ever laid eyes on before. A chill crawled over him, like standing in a graveyard packed with endless stone coffins. They burst into a gigantic cavern packed with endless stone slabs, stretching as far as the eye could see. And the sheer scale of that underground cemetery hit like a wrecking ball, so massive it just overwhelmed everyone. Kevil leaned in and admitted he'd left a few things scattered around after his patrol duties, and Ryan's eyes snapped wide when he finally understood what his companion meant. The lid of a nearby stone coffin started to slide open all by itself. One of the summons blurted that it felt like forever since it had last been home. Kevil's shadowy hand shot up and effortlessly hauled the heavy stone lid aside. Ryan didn't blink, then Kevil's summon, Eve, slid down and sat among the stone slabs, telling him she couldn't believe she'd finally been able to be so glad that to finally crawl back home to this place. The Anubis-like summon beamed and shouted, "Big brother," at his nearby brother. Eve beamed with pride as she proudly showed off the little flowers she'd planted here long ago. The Anubis summon prayed the other flowers would open up just as breathtakingly. And Eve leaned in and said this place was everything to them, absolutely crucial. Ryan stepped forward and yelled Kevil's name, but unease was creeping up fast in his chest, and he turned to his companion and demanded to know what was about to happen here. The tiny summons just stared him down, giving him zero answers to the question burning in his mind. A voice cut through the room, flat out saying that if they just sat there and waited, nothing would change. And Kevil told Ryan straight up, the final outcome was gonna hinge on just the two of them. Ryan froze in disbelief, grilling Kevil for hiding the fact that he had a way to fix his arm. Kevil's summon stared in shock as the boy clocked everything with razor-sharp, spot-on deduction. As Ryan pressed for every detail, he demanded to hear all of Kevil's reasons. No excuses, no hiding. Kevil dropped to one knee and admitted that his quick grasp had been a huge help, and told him they were running out of time, so he needed to skip the runaround and hit the point fast. They found the path to fix Ryan's arm right here in convection. He said it was way easier than digging through existing magic, hunting for an answer. But whether he spilled the method depended on Ryan's answer to the question he was about to say. Ryan dropped into his seat, determination hardening like steel as he blurted out, "My mind is made up," and he swore that whatever storms came next, his faith in Kevil would never break. With that sorted, he leaned in and fired his first question. "All right, but what exactly is a convention?" Kevil leaned in and said this place was a graveyard, where the fallen monsters' bodies get stacked and gathered. Ryan's eyes shot wide open when he finally knew his gut feeling about the graveyard hadn't been wrong. Kevil didn't bother with explanations, he just dropped one solemn word that confirmed Ryan's suspicion. Revealing the truth, he was a soul trapped inside a monster's corpse, leaving a walking grave in his wake. Ryan stared in total disbelief, because he couldn't wrap his head around something like this actually being real. And Kevel straight up admitted it, seeing a body moving without its original soul. Yeah, that was a full-on anomaly. He told me that even among monsters, his kind were still shoved aside like total outsiders. Mocked and hated by everyone, they treated their very lives like a crime. But Kevel didn't crumble, he stared the whole mess down, and somehow it sparked something truly interesting in his mind. Questioning every rule of a world that threw him away, he refused to give up, he pushed to learn it all. He told me the only way to keep his family safe was to grab every piece of knowledge he could, because the world they faced was hostile and ready to strike. And right in the middle of the chaos, he locked in one mission: take down Raju, the king of monsters. Ryan realized the goal was locked in place years before he ever even stepped into the picture. Kevel painted a terrifying picture of Rajua, a massive beast, snapping into action and rallying monsters to exterminate humanity. And hardly a soul dared to challenge his authority, except the people of Kevel. He couldn't stop asking why monsters and humans just wouldn't learn to live side by side in peace, believing that in the end, this endless war was never going to serve anyone's real interests. He figured the only way to end this chaos was to rip the conflict straight out at the source. But just as he was still plotting, humans slammed into Rajua and took him down first. Kevel stared in disbelief, realizing right then that the king's overwhelming power would crush him. No chance at all. And from that day forward, the fragile truce between humans and monsters snapped, shattering everything. His tiny summons shook in fear, replaying the brutal, violent days that came right after. As humanity shoved deeper into the earth, Kevel had to fight tooth and nail to defend his home. Right in the middle of those battles, he learned a make-or-break lesson fast and the hard way, just as he finally witnessed firsthand the fresh new power humanity had just unlocked. In a flashback, young Jean unleashes his magic, only to watch it utterly fail against him, forcing younger Chris to shout a full retreat, flat out admitting they had no chance to win. He replayed that moment, still stunned by the human's technique, praying it wasn't magic. The power hooked him so hard that day after day, his craving for it only burned hotter. But after that run-in, the humans vanished for what felt like forever. No one came back for ages. And he kept dreaming that one day, with power like this, he'd tear through Monster King Rajua and beat him. Right here in the present, his summons suddenly jerk at something nobody can see. And as he keeps talking, a familiar wizard's hat flashes through his mind, because that's the moment he finally met Ryan for the first time. He knew this chance came once in a lifetime, there was no way he'd let it slip by. And Ryan's rage exploded as he realized Kevel rigged their first fight just to dig up the secrets of magic. Ryan snapped that he was scared he'd accidentally kill Kevel, because Kevel was absolutely not pulling any punches. And then he apologized because, yeah, he'd acted like a reckless idiot with zero sense of self-preservation. Kevel kept talking, and every word about that reckless kid lit a spark, until it finally forced his decision. He decided to team up with Ryan, and together, man, they were going to shake the world until it changed. Ryan just froze, stunned, speechless, as that massive, totally unbelievable claim slammed into him. Kevel told me straight up if he wanted to pull this off, he had to put Ryan's arm back together, so that's why he dragged him to this place. But when he finally came clean, one huge snag crushed his grand plan. Just because Ryan called him friend didn't mean he was on their side, especially not with every monster out there. And the moment Ryan healed, he feared he'd flip on the other monsters too, leaving Rajua behind like nothing. Kevel then kicked the story into gear and brought up the moment they were torn apart by a towering boulder. And Ryan snapped to it. Someone had trapped him alone on purpose, daring him to crack and turn violent. A summon chimed in, laughing that it was crystal clear Ryan was itching to blast that rock with magic. While another admitted he nearly stopped Ryan dead in his tracks, just to cast a spell and snag the chance to use it. Still, somehow, Ryan barreled all the way to the convention without a single person getting hurt. Kevel dropped to his knees in front of him, begging to know if he finally understood what that move meant. Saying it like that meant one thing: Ryan had just been chosen, because the world's savior needed everything he had. Kevel snapped that they couldn't waste a second, time was running out fast. They were demanding a showdown with Rajua, then forging a world where everyone finally gets to live in peace. He promised to fix Ryan's arm on the spot if Ryan would just join his cause. Ryan gawked in total disbelief at the massive, world-shaking proposal. He blurted out that he had zero clue what to say to something this mind-blowing, like, how could anyone even talk about it? They'd never even thought about changing the world, and they just couldn't accept it. He finally laid out exactly why he needed his arm back, and promised himself he'd take down Rajua for good. He clenched his fist and swallowed the truth. His motives were nothing but pure selfishness. All he wanted was one jaw-dropping moment, so everyone would finally see him and sing his praises. A flashback kicks off when someone pounds on the younger Ryan's door, and an older man smiles warmly and asks for his help, and together they get the shop ready for the day. Swearing at him to stop stressing over that plate he smashed, because hey, stuff like that happens all the time. But Ryan shot the man down cold, telling him never to come back asking for anything again. The boy's brutal rejection left the man reeling, hurt, stunned, and totally lost. Ryan just wanted to be left in peace, no one to poke, no one to laugh at him, so. Then he finally ran into his master, and boom, magic exploded into his life, flipping his whole world on its head. He got consumed by one ruthless belief: if he wanted to grow stronger, he had to do everything alone. That growing impatience clawed at him until he lost his way, and shoved his friends further out of reach. So he trudged down a lone, silent path, certain this was the only way forward. Until he was thrown into a desperate situation he couldn't survive alone. And right then Keval burst into view, reached out, and steered him through the darkness. Back in the present, Ryan nodded and told Keval, "I get your plans, so let me help as." While the tiny summons leaned in close, hanging on every breath of his emotional, gut-punching confession. But he screamed that the one who's only ever lived for himself still can't save the world. Still, he admitted it, saving the world sounded unbelievable, even if he couldn't bring himself to believe he was a hero. He figured that if he could save the world, the whole crowd would finally sing his praises. But deep down, he couldn't picture a win, because he knew he was just too weak to pull it off. He leaned in and told Keval that a guy like him could never meet expectations that high. Keval snapped back with one shocking word, and it just hung there, pure, wonderful silence. He praised Ryan, telling him the kid once again crushed his expectations and made it happen. And Ryan was totally stunned, totally lost, because he couldn't wrap his head around Keval's weirdly positive reaction at all. Keval told Ryan straight up that admitting weakness was exactly the answer he'd been waiting for, because it proved he could level up even harder than he already was. The summon message rings out. This hunger to get better is the calling card of someone who can spark real change and make it happen. Keval shot back that weakness wasn't the real issue. What counts is the hunger to change. Ryan snapped that there had to be someone stronger and better for the job, but Keval snapped, cutting him off in an instant, saying there was nobody else. He leaned in and told Ryan, "I'm forgetting something huge about what we share," telling him with zero doubt that the two of them were made for each other. He even dug up Ryan's old words from a previous chat and hurled them right back in his face, and Ryan finally cracked a small laugh, shattering his wall of doubt in the process. He grabbed Keval's hand, admitting that if he was with him, maybe, just maybe, it could finally be possible. As the tiny summon stared ahead, a spark of hope for what came next flickered in its eyes. Ryan felt his confidence snap back the moment he said it, knowing Keval had his back, because fear had nowhere to land. In a blink, Keval's head snapped clean off his body, severed in a single flash of movement. The boy could do nothing but lock up in pure horror as the sudden, brutal attack tore in out of nowhere, right in front of him. His mind buckled, trying to wrap itself around the impossible sight staring him straight in the face. One of the summons finally spotted the attacker, like he'd been hunting them the whole time. A huge winged beast with razor-sharp talons crashed down nearby, and thank the stars, they hadn't gone far enough to be caught. It exposed a badly healed wing, admitting it skipped all the proper steps to reach here while. Ryan erupted in a scream, stunned to the bone, like his mind couldn't even begin to process what just happened. A sinister voice cut in, sneering, "So why are you still this confused about the attack?" And the harpy snapped that she'd let him think it over after he was dead,